Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this call shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, Dr. Hahn.
Good morning.
If for some reason you can't hear me, just let me know.
Okay.
Could you please state your entire name and spell it for the court reporter, sir?
My entire name is Patrick, Patrick, middle initial P. Last name is Han, Han.
And doctor, what do you do for a living, sir?
I'm a neurosurgeon at UF Health at Halifax Health in Daytona Beach, Florida.
What does a neurosurgeon do, sir?
Neurosurgeon is responsible for evaluating patients with a disease of the brain or spinal cord and operating when necessary on the brain or spinal cord to help those patients.
And you said you practice at Halifax Hospital?
Yes.
Could you tell the jury just briefly your educational background that allows you to practice as a neurosurgeon, sir?
Yes. A neurosurgeon graduates from medical school after 4 years, which I did in 1997 from the University of Kansas. And then the training program is 7 years of residency, which I performed from 1997 to 2005 in Phoenix, Arizona at the Barrow Neurological Institute. And then at that point, you're able to go into independent practice.
Can you briefly tell the jury your career in your independent practice since you finished your residency?
After I finished my residency in 2005, I became an assistant professor at the University of Louisville Department of Neurosurgery and did that until approximately 2006. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, was the director of neurosurgery at St. John Medical and did that for 13 years. And then approximately 3.5 years ago, became the medical director of neurosurgery at UF Health at Halifax Health in Daytona Beach, Florida. I currently work for the University of Florida for the state of Florida. I became a board certified neurosurgeon approximately 4 years after graduating from residency, which is pretty standard.
And sir, as a neurosurgeon working for the University of Florida at Halifax, are you on call at times?
Yes,
And were you the on-call neurosurgeon the evening that Officer Jason Rayner was shot in the head on June 23rd of 2021?
yes,
And were you one of the first doctors to treat Jason after his arrival at the hospital that evening?
yes.
Do you recall your initial observations of Officer Rayner when you first saw him once you got to the hospital?
Yes, when Officer Rayner came into the emergency room to the trauma bay, there was no signs of life. He was intubated and then resuscitated, fluids and medications. He then started moving his right upper extremity. He obtained his CT of his head during his workup, demonstrated that he had a gunshot wound to the brain that started on the left side. The bullet entered the left side of the head and entered into the brain, causing a hemorrhage and fracture of the skull.
And were you initially working alongside trauma doctors as well?
Yes, I was.
Was that Dr. Nelson?
Yes.
Now, on the brain scans, did you see any shrapnel in his brain?
Yes, there was some metal fragments from a bullet deep in the brain in the expected trajectory. The trajectory appeared to start on the left side and went through the skull, and the shrapnel was lodged deep on the left side of the brain. In addition, there was a tract of hemorrhage associated with the bullet that went down towards the central part of the brain, as well as a hemorrhage upon the initial entry into the brain just below the skull.
Now, would the shrapnel be both metal from the bullet, but also part of his skull as well?
Yes.
Did you perform a procedure on Officer Rayner after the imaging was completed and reviewed?
Yes, he was moved up to the intensive care unit after resuscitation. I put an intracranial pressure monitor, which consists of making an incision on the right side of the head at the bedside in the ICU, making a small burr hole with a handheld drill, and then putting a fiber optic wire approximately 3 centimeters into the brain and attaching it to a monitor to measure the intracranial pressure. The intracranial pressure was very high, about 2 to 3 times normal. We attempted to give him medications to reduce the pressure called mannitol. That really had no effect.
When you say intracranial pressure, can you describe that a little more, maybe in layman's terms?
Yes, we know that a standard living patient without head trauma or disease, that the intracranial pressure should be anywhere from 0 to 10 to 12. We measure it in millimeters of mercury, like we would measure your blood pressure. When there are mass lesions like a tumor, or in this case, trauma to the brain causing a hemorrhage and significant brain swelling, that will cause the pressure in the skull to elevate. And anything greater than about 20 is abnormal. Upon placing the fiber optic monitor, my recollection was that it was in the 40s.
And if the intracranial or brain pressure is not resolved, can it lead to death of a patient?
Yes.
And were you concerned about that potentially happening with Officer Rayner once you saw the measurements?
Yes.
So what did you do after getting that monitor in there and seeing that the brain pressure was so highly elevated?
I then recommended to the family that we should go to the operating room immediately. Our only hope was to make a large incision on the left side of the head, like a reverse question mark, starting at just in front of the ear and then curving posteriorly all the way back towards the back, and then coming vertically about straight line about 10 centimeters, and then horizontally towards the anterior, the front of the head, and then elevating that scalp off the skull, and then removing basically half the skull on that side, and then evacuating any hemorrhage. And by doing so, that would allow the brain that was damaged to swell out the whole, taking the pressure off the rest of the normal brain, and specifically, most importantly, the brainstem. The procedure was developed during military conflict for soldiers, and we know that it was very effective.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about that, doctor. So was it the left side of his skull that you removed, a portion of the left side of his skull?
Yes.
And when you say that you removed hemorrhage, what does that mean?
Well, we could see on the CAT scan that the bullet had caused rupture of blood vessels, arteries, and veins as it entered through the skull and then through what's called the dura mater, or the brain, and through the superficial surface of the brain, and pretty much all along the tract of the bullet. And so after we made the incision and removed the skull, we opened up this dura mater, and we encountered a large amount of blood and evacuated all of that and controlled the bleeding.
And by evacuate, you mean you just removed it, right?
We remove it with suction and yes.
And did this operation, this initial operation you did resolve the brain pressure for the time being?
I would use the word improve. It did not resolve it. I think it improved it to the point that we had an opportunity to save his life. When the pressures were in the mid 40s to low 50s, that's not compatible with living any longer than a short period of time. We had noted when we elevated the scalp that the bone was fractured. Some of the fragments were penetrating through the brain. Officially, I could see them with my gross eyes, so I did remove those fragments of bone. I controlled the bleeding into the brain the best that I could. Evacuated also some hemorrhage that went into the brain with my suction, and then placed some drains under the skin and tunneled them out, and then closed the scalp, thereby allowing, as I said, the brain to come out. We then transferred him back to the intensive care unit, and then started proper management of his increased intracranial pressure.
And doctor, did you continue to be involved in Officer Rayner's care over the several weeks that he was at Halifax Hospital?
Yes.
And did Officer Rayner eventually, after further complications from the gunshot wound, pass away?
Yes.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Doctor, I don't have any other further questions for you, but defense might have some. Please stand by.
Yes.
Any cross-examination?
Just very briefly, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Hahn. You're not able to give any opinion as to the distance that the firearm was from Mr. Rayner's head, are you?
No.
You're not able to give any opinion as to the angle of entry that the bullet went in, are you?
No.
Okay. I have nothing else, Your Honor.
Thank you. Yes.
Just one more question for you, Doctor. When you did see Officer Rayner that night, and you evaluated him and did the initial operation, did you ever observe any soot on his head or around the wound?
No.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hahn.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Are you, what's your name again?
Hello, my name is Lars Nelson.
All right, and this is your witness?
Yes.
All right. If you'll raise your right hand, Ms. Nelson. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this call shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
If for some reason you cannot hear what I'm saying, please just let me know and I'll repeat myself, okay?
Okay.
Doctor, could you please state your entire name and spell it for the court reporter we have here in the courtroom?
My name is Lars Spencer Nelson, Lars, SpencerNelson.
And doctor, what do you do for a living, sir?
I'm a trauma and general surgeon.
What does a trauma and general surgeon do?
Typically, they provide services such as on-call coverage, surgery would need to be done. From the general side, gallbladders, appendixes, some of the bread and butter general surgery, and from a traumatic side, chest tubes, colon resections, colostomies, controlling bleeding.
And sir, where do you practice?
I practice in Daytona Beach, Florida.
At Halifax Hospital?
Correct.
And can you tell the jury briefly your educational background that allows you to practice in medicine?
I completed 4 years of college. I went on to medical school, then on to general surgery residency for 5 years. I completed a fellowship and completed all the boarding and the exams necessary in order to be credentialed as a trauma and general surgeon.
And can you also tell the jury briefly your career in the medical field, where you've been, what you've done?
I've been in Daytona Beach, Florida, since the entirety of my practice in 2016. While I've been here, I've been a part of North Florida Surgeons, which is a large general surgery practice group here. I've been part of it was a Global Trauma Services initially, and now University of Florida, taking care and doing the trauma surgery at Halifax Hospital. I've also been an associated part of Florida Healthcare Plans as a partial general surgeon, and done some locums coverage as well.
And does being a trauma physician require you to be on call at times, doctor?
It does.
Were you on call the night that Officer Jason Rayner was shot back in June of 2021?
I was.
And were you one of the initial treating physicians for Officer Jason Rayner?
Yes.
What were your initial observations of Officer Rayner when he arrived at the trauma bay at Halifax?
Initially, as what I can recollect, he came in, in basically what we call extremis. He was very sick. His blood pressure was very low, and he was hypertensive and shock. He had some trauma noted to his face and head. He came in on a backboard via EMS. I believe they initially tried to attempt to get an airway to secure that, were unsuccessful. So typically in the trauma bay, that's our line of work, is to do the airway, the breathing circulation initially, and stabilize the patient. So those were all initiated.
And did you have an opportunity to observe the gunshot wound to the left side of his head?
I did.
Was there any injury to his left eye that you recall?
There was extensive injury to this socket.
When you observed Officer Rayner and began treating him that night, do you recall ever observing any soot around the gunshot wound?
I don't recall. My primary goal there is to stabilize the patient, damage control, bleeding control, things of that nature. I don't recall any direct soot.
And as part of his trauma treatment, were scans ordered of his brain and his head?
Yes, they were.
And were you working alongside a neurosurgeon by the name of Dr. Hahn?
I was.
Did there come a point in his initial treatment that it appeared as if Officer Rayner didn't have any brain activity?
On initial arrival, he did not appear to be doing much of anything, and throughout the initial course, again, when we stabilized him, resuscitated him, and intubated him, he did not really have much, if any, neurologic activity. And we got him up to the intensive care unit, again, to stabilize him. And there was no really significant signs that I could recollect of any neurologic activity.
And is that where he stayed after he left the trauma unit? He went to the intensive care unit?
Correct. He went from the trauma unit, CT scans, and then up into the critical care unit.
And as a trauma doctor, that kind of ended your involvement since you work primarily out of the trauma bay?
It did.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Doctor, I don't have any other questions for you, but the defense attorneys might have a few. Please stand by, sir.
Okay.
Any cross?
Dr. Nelson, you aren't able to give any opinion as to how close the gunshot was fired from, are you?
I can't give a direct opinion. It appeared to be relatively close given the extensive injuries he succumbed to based on the CT scans and physical evidence, but I can't say specifically.
Right. So it appeared to be close, but you can't say how far away it was.
I can't specifically.
Okay. All right. And you said you didn't see any soot, but would he have been treated by paramedics on his way in and possibly cleaning the wound in that area?
Possibly.
Okay. Did you see any stripling, from the barrel or from the gunshot?
Can you explain?
Well, if it's really close, point blank, you'll see the burn marks or the marking around the skin that it's stripling. Did you see anything like that?
And again, from what I recollect, there's bleeding and maybe a little bit of brain matter, but I couldn't see any direct skin discoloration. I was primarily there to stabilize him, get his blood pressure up, and basically save his life.
Yeah. And then as far as, I know the shot came from the left, but do you have any conclusion as to the angle, whether it was going up or down, or was it straight across, or do you have any conclusion as to that?
I don't have any specific conclusion. The trajectory appeared to come from the left side, and there was extensive facial trauma and damage damage to his brain with bleeding and subdural hematomas, but I don't know exactly the direction live from there.
I don't have anything else, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. Any redirect? All right, thank you, Dr. Nelson. You're excused.
Thank you.
Good morning, Doctor.
Morning.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Sure. My name is Noah Prince. I'm a plastic and reconstructive surgeon with the University of Florida and also at Halifax Health. I'm the chief of plastic surgery.
Okay, is that in Daytona Beach?
It is.
Okay, and how long have you been there, Doc?
I've been here almost 3 years.
And before that?
I was in private practice in Pennsylvania, and then before that in training in Gainesville at the University of Florida.
Okay, and educational background?
Did my undergraduate at Duke University. I did my medical school at Tufts University and also Eastern Virginia Medical School, and then an integrated plastic surgery residency training at the University of Florida.
Any specialties, or did you already say that?
Within plastic surgery, I'm a craniofacial trauma surgeon. I do general reconstruction, hand surgery, all sorts of general plastic surgery sort of thing. So it's all encompassing.
Okay, any board certifications?
Yep, I'm certified by the American Board of Plastic Surgery.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. At this point, I tender the witness be allowed to provide opinion testimony.
Any objection? The witness will be allowed to express an opinion.
Thank you, Judge. So let's talk about a patient that you had back in June and July of 2021 by the name of Officer Jason Rayner. Do you recall that case? Do you recall that patient?
I do.
Okay, how did you get involved, sir?
Sure. He presented as a trauma patient. prior to my evaluation by about 2 weeks, and I was asked to consult for his facial fractures. I was serving as the essentially the craniofacial trauma surgeon. I believe I saw him about 2 weeks after he presented. He had extensive facial fractures extending from essentially all across his face, and they asked me to get involved on a delayed basis.
And what was your involvement to be, sir?
Sure. As the craniofacial trauma surgeon, I frequently treat patients that have fractures of their face, soft tissue injuries, so including skin, muscle, tendon, and they asked that I evaluate him for these injuries, as well as potential foreign bodies that were remaining in his face.
Did there come a time, Doc, when you performed a procedure on Officer Jason Rayner?
Yes. So after I saw him, he was just outside of the operative window for any acute or immediate intervention. But as I followed along over time, his swelling subsided, so it came down. He had a foreign body that was just over his right eyelid and right at the junction between the eyelid and the eyebrow. He had already lost his left eye. So in discussion with the patient's family, I determined that it would be prudent to remove this foreign body to, one, protect his eye, but also as the foreign body became more apparent, it was going to eventually threaten the overlying skin. In particular, the family was also concerned, they saw this very distressing foreign body, which was clearly a fragment of the bullet. And they were with him every day looking at it. And I imagine, I know based on my discussion with them that it was very distressing to them. So they asked that I remove it.
So it was visible protruding from around the right eyebrow area. Is that what you're saying, Doc?
Yeah, it wasn't protruding through the skin, but you could clearly see the bump. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I removed that at bedside. That was the procedure that I performed, as you asked.
When you removed it, what did you do with the bullet?
Sure. So I took this out. I put it in a specimen cup. I kept it with me during the whole procedure. The procedure was performed in the intensive care unit, and I brought that directly outside of his room to the detective from the Daytona Beach Police Department that was right outside of his room.
So you gave it to the detective in the specimen cup?
It went directly from me to the detective in the specimen cup.
Can you do the sheriff, please? Okay. Your Honor, we're going to try to see if it'll work. There may be a camera here.
Over here.
Can you stand here, Doc?
There's no camera there.
No.
I don't know what he can see.
I'm staring at the backside of a TV. Oh, hold on, let me zoom in on the witness stand. Yes, I do see that.
Okay, now, here's what I'm pointing to here. Is that projectile bullet that you removed from Officer Jason Rayner's head from the ground?
It looks exactly like it.
And does this appear to be the specimen cup that you placed?
It looks exactly like it.
Yes, sir. I believe this has already been introduced, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, permission to Doc, let's talk about reconstruction for a minute. Would you agree that a substantial portion of Officer Jason Rayner's skull had been removed?
Yes. So immediately after the injury, I believe you already heard from Dr. Hahn earlier. He had to remove a portion of his skull. And so with that missing portion of the skull around the brain, but additionally with the missing portion of the facial bones, he would have serious disfigurement, dysfunction. So both of us together planned a reconstructive surgery involving a custom-made implant that was based on the 3D reproduction of his CT scan. And we were waiting for the point where he would become stable enough, the swelling would subside enough so that we could perform this reconstruction.
Did you work with, what was the name of the company that was going to create this? I'm not sure what you call it, like an implant?
An implant, yes. Yeah, that was Synthes. Synthes is a Johnson & Johnson subsidiary, I believe.
And had you consulted with Synthes and were they preparing some models for you to review?
Yeah, these things can take quite a time to produce. So we did have the models, at least the digital images prepared and ready for production. We were just waiting until we got a little bit closer to the reconstruction itself to physically produce them, but they had sent me a plan.
And were these models necessary for you to review to plan the reconstruction?
Yes,
Were they helpful to you?
very, very.
Did they also indicate the nature of injuries and consequence of the gunshot wound to the head?
Yeah, they more clearly demonstrated the missing bony tissue, areas needing to be reproduced, and it gave me a good replica of the other side of the face projected onto his, the missing portion of his skull and his face, so that we could more adequately reconstruct the areas that were missing.
And just a moment, Jerome.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Doc, we're doing a screen.
I can see it, yep.
Yeah, can you take that down, please? It hasn't been introduced in evidence. We can't get ahead of ourselves,
Yes, sir.
okay?
Your Honor, I'll go to the camera. Should I?
Okay. Well, I don't know what the jurors can see in their screen. What do they see in their screen? Only the witness can? Only him? Only him? Okay, go ahead.
Doc, can you see?
Yeah, hold on, let me zoom in there. Yes, I do see it. I can see it, I just can't hear you very well, I'm sorry.
Okay, can you see these, Doc?
Yes.
What's that? Well, the bailiff is standing in front of him. If you make it easier, I want every juror to just look towards the audience. That makes it just easier, okay?
Doc, you see this one?
Yes, that's part of the reconstructive plan from Cynthia's. Yep,
And this page, same thing, Doc?
same thing.
And the final one?
Yes,
Are these fair and accurate representations of the documents that you got from Cynthia with
Yes.
with evaluating the injuries and to prepare for a reconstruction?
yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd ask to them be moved in there.
Okay, subject to the discussions on the record and your defense position, I'll go ahead and admit the items as evidence. Okay, now you can look back over here.
May I publish my objection?
May do so.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Doc, can you see that on your screen?
I do.
Okay, so basically, I'd like to talk about, I'm facing this and I'm talking the top left
Mhm.
image. Could you tell us what that is, sir?
Sure. So the top left image on my screen is the one with a little bit of red. What I see here, this is a CT scan that was repeated after his neurosurgical procedure. So he's had the portion of his skull removed by the neurosurgeon. And this is a 3D representation of his CT scan. So there's been some computerized processing. And as a result, the areas in red are considered to either be bone fragments that are not viable, meaning they're separated to the point where they're not going to be useful, or fragments of the bullet. And so the image on the top with the red are the areas that are going to be removed, and then by the computer, they've been removed right below them in the areas without any red. And that helps them making the reconstruction so they don't take into account things that really don't need to be there.
Very good. And how about, let's go to the right side of the screen. Can you discuss the top and bottom portions of the right side?
Sure. So these are different views of the reconstruction that I was going to perform in conjunction with Dr. Hahn, the neurosurgery. This is the implant is seen in the multiple different colors. It was going to be a 2-piece implant made of PEEK, polyether ketone. It's a strong plastic. And the two different pieces were obviously going to be the two different colors that you see there. Dr. Hahn was going to be placing the darker colored piece over the brain. And then my portion was going to incorporate a lot of the facial bones. You could see the front view on top, and then immediately down below it, you see the view from the back of the patient's head.
Doc, this is the next page. Could you start on the left side again, please?
Yeah, on the left side, so on the top, you see the missing portion of the skull. You also see the fractures of the multiple different facial bones. Of particular interest to me, you see, the cheekbone. This is the side view from Officer Rayner's left side. So you see the cheek. I guess you guys, hopefully you can see me as well as the picture because I'm pointing on my own face, but the area of his cheek has been extensively fractured with fractures kind of going all the way across his face. And then you see the placement of the implant, which reconstructs his orbit. So the areas around the eyeball, in addition to those around his skull and his head protecting his brain.
And before you move on to the right side, Doc, what happened to Officer Rayner's left eye socket and eye?
Yeah, so prior to me evaluating him, his eyeball was removed by our ophthalmologist, Dr. Patel. It was deemed to not be viable. And so my portion of the reconstruction was going to recreate his orbit or the bony socket that his eyeball normally sits in so that a prosthesis could fit in there and it would eventually look, as similar as we can make it to the other side. Frequently, if the eyeball is viable, we reconstruct the orbit so that the two eyeballs sit at the same level. And we're also trying to do that with the bony structure that we're creating with this implant, even though he didn't have a viable eyeball there.
Okay, now the right side, please.
The right side, so on the top of the screen, you're seeing essentially a top-down view of his skull with both of the implants there. And then on the bottom, this is a bottom-up view, but they've removed his jawbone so that you can more clearly see each of the bones in the middle and upper thirds of his face there.
Thank you, sir. You can take it. So your plan was to do reconstructive surgery on Officer Rayner at some point pending his recovery, correct?
Exactly.
And of course, you didn't have an opportunity to do the reconstruction, did you?
No, unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries prior to us being able to get to that point.
Yes, sir. Now, do you consider yourself an expert in ballistics or forensics at all?
No, I'm not. My job is to evaluate a patient when they walk in the door, determine the full extent of their injuries, and develop a treatment plan going forward. My job is not to look backwards and decide what caused that injury unless it's an ongoing insult, say a chemical burn, if the chemical is still there or something. But if this is a trauma, I look at the CT scan, I can tell you where the injuries lay, but it's not to look backwards.
You can say where the injuries lay, but what about issues like proximity of the weapon to the wound? Do you feel like your expertise prepares you to testify to something like that?
So ordinarily I can comment on a few different characteristics that I can observe, burn marks, those sorts of things. Unfortunately, in Officer Rayner's case, I didn't see him for the first 2 weeks. So in addition to the nurses cleaning his wounds, him being in the hospital, he also had a neurosurgical procedure immediately in the area of those wounds prior to me evaluating him about 2 weeks after he presented to the hospital. So my ability to testify about any initial injuries, those sorts of things would be significantly limited in this case.
Okay. End of the witness, Judge.
Yes, any cross-examination?
Morning, Dr. Prince. Can you hear me okay?
Good morning. Yes.
Sir, you have a very important skill set in the medical field, but I think you were candid in acknowledging that you're not trained in ballistics. Is that correct?
No, I'm not.
Or
I do have some training for facial trauma with ballistics. For instance, I took ballistic trauma courses down in Tampa, and as part of my treatment, I treat patients with that, but the ballistics aspect itself, no.
And there are medical doctors that are trained with a forensic component as well. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Involving a firearm?
You'd have to ask that appropriate expert.
And just, I don't mean to be redundant, but you're not in a position to talk about how your work in this case sheds any light on the positioning of Mr. Wallace or Mr. Rayner that evening, are you?
No.
Is your work in this case such that you can offer any evidence as to how close the gun was to Mr. Rayner at the time that the gun was discharged.
No,
And you're not able to determine whether these two folks were inches or feet apart at the time of the gunshot.
no.
Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, thank you. Anything else? All right, thank you. Thank you, your excuse at this time.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
Good morning, ma'am. You're gonna have to talk really loud.
Yeah, you're gonna take a very microphone. You can bend it down, please. Thank you. Good.
Outside. Introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name, please. What do you do for work?
I'm a CNA.
Do you know Otha Wallace's brother?
Yes,
What's his name?
Octavius.
How do you know Octavius?
She's very, very soft-spoken. You have to project a little more.
His name is Octavius
What's Octavius' last name?
Wallace.
How do you know Octavius Wallace?
He's my boyfriend.
Let me bring you back to, it would have been June 23rd of 2021. Were you dating Octavius back then, ma'am?
Yes,
At some point that night, did you receive a call from Octavius where you asked to pick him up or help him use a car?
yes.
Tell us about that and what happened.
It was late. He called asking me to come get him. I went and picked him up. That was it.
Let's break it down a little bit. Where were you at when you received the phone call?
I was at home.
Where was Octavius?
The place exactly I can't recall.
Did you pick up Octavius by himself?
No.
Who was Octavius with?
Later found his brother.
Was he with Otha Wallace?
Yes.
What were you asked to do at that time?
To go to Georgia.
Who were you going to drive to Georgia?
Otho.
What was Octavius there too?
Yes.
What kind of car did you have?
I have a Toyota Camry.
Who was driving the car initially when you started? You?
Yes.
Do you know where everybody sat in the car? Where did Octavius sit? Where did both sit?
Otho was in the back seat and Octavius was in the passenger seat.
Now, when you left your residence that night, it was dark out.
Yes.
Did you know exactly where you were going to be going in Georgia?
No.
Did somebody tell you? Or they put in a GPS for you?
To get to Georgia, no, but once we got into Georgia, I don't remember if there was a GPS or if it was just voice instructions.
Do you recall your drive up there to the highway or not?
Yeah, we took 75.
And you took that north into Georgia?
Yes.
Can you describe was Otha Wallace his demeanor normal?
To me, it was normal because I don't know him like that.
Okay. He wasn't upset, wasn't crying,
No.
didn't seem hysterical to anybody.
No.
At any time when you were driving him in the car, did he say that he shot a police officer in self-defense?
No.
Just a moment, sir.
Yes.
Did you ultimately drop Mr. Wallace off in Georgia?
Yes.
Do you remember what kind of area it was, or was it dark?
It was dark.
When Otha Wallace got out of the car, did Octavius stay in the car with you?
Yes. That I can recall. Yeah.
And what did you guys do when you left that location in Georgia?
Came back to Gainesville.
Did you did you have a phone back then, ma'am?
Yes.
And was your phone number 850-812-9031?
Yes.
At the time you drove Otha Wallace up there to Georgia, did you have any idea that he was involved in killing a police officer or shooting a police officer?
No.
The location you picked him up in, initially when you were in Alachua County,
Mhm.
was it somewhere in Gainesville area?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. No further questions.
Thank you. Any cross-examination?
Morning, ma'am.
Morning.
You didn't know Mr. Wallace, did you?
No.
I think maybe you'd only met him one time.
Yes.
And when you drove up there, it was late at night, right?
Correct.
Dark.
Yes.
Very dark. All right, and nobody really talked the whole way up there, did they?
No.
So no, and hopefully he'd asked you, the state had asked if he said, "Hey, I shot a cop in self-defense." He never said anything about anything, did he?
Correct.
And as far as the demeanor, he was sitting in the back seat, correct?
Correct.
Did you keep an eye on him the whole time and see what he was, how he was acting?
No.
Just drove straight ahead, kept your eye on the road?
Yes.
I don't have anything else.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No, sir.
All right, thank you very much. May the witness be excused. State defense. You're released from this appeal. Thank you.
Please state your entire name and spell it for the court reporter.
Name is Amanda Stevens, Amanda. Last name is Stephenens.
And Ms. Stevens, what do you do for a living?
I'm a senior crime intelligence analyst at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement out of our Orlando regional office.
How long have you been with FDLE?
Almost 19 years.
What are your specific duties in working with FDLE?
For the last 12 years or so, I have been assigned to our electronic surveillance support team, which is a task force specializing in electronic surveillance utilized to aid in fugitive apprehension and case support.
Can you tell the jury about your educational background, please?
I have a 4-year degree from the University of Central Florida.
Can you tell the jury what historical cellular records analysis is? It's a mouthful.
Yeah, sure. What we do in historical cell record analysis and mapping is take the phone records from the phone company. So not from the device or from any other resource, but the original records from the phone company, and analyze them for usage, pattern, communication activity patterns, as well as associates. And additionally, if there is location available, map that as well to have a general area of where the device is located.
And do you have specialized training in cellular record analysis?
I do, yes.
Tell the jury about that, please.
Since I've been in the unit, I have about 300 hours of classroom training received. I'm additionally an instructor for cell record analysis and mapping across the state of Florida, and a testifying witness for the state of Florida.
Are you familiar with the current cellular technologies utilized by the major cellular carriers in the U.S.?
Yes, I am.
Are you familiar with how these providers keep their records?
I am, yes.
And the records are used to potentially map the location of a cellular device. Are those called call detail records?
Yeah, so universally, from the phone companies, they're referred to as CDRs for call detail records. And then each company may have a specific name for each file type, but commonly just across the board referred to as CDRs.
How many times do you think you've used call detail records or CDRs to map the location of a cellular device?
Thousands.
And you said you've had an opportunity on multiple occasions to testify about this subject matter before?
I have, yes.
And have you presented results of your cellular analysis in court before?
Yes, I have.
Now, at this time, I'd ask this witness be able to give opinion testimony regarding cellular analysis and the call detail records.
Without objection, admitted, allowed to express an opinion.
Ms. Stevens, if I pick up my cell phone and I make a phone call, can you explain to the jury the actual technology and what happens that allows that call to connect?
So while your phone is powered on, it's constantly communicating with the network. We refer to that commonly as surveying. It's surveying the environment to determine where the closest antennas are, where the strongest signal is coming from, and if at any point you need to use your cell phone, where would it connect to? So that's all happening in the background constantly. That's why our batteries don't last forever, right? And when you need to either then make or receive a call, your phone is instantaneously going to connect to the antenna that's providing the best quality of service using its internal antennas, connecting to the external antennas that are commonly placed on cell sites or cell towers. Sometimes in rural environments, the antennas are still on those large metal structures that we think of when we think of cell towers. And sometimes in more urban environments, they're either hidden or disguised in the landscape. And sometimes we won't even realize there's an antenna there, but typically on the tallest or largest structure in an area, a flagpole or a church steeple, top of a building, things like that.
Now, Ms. Stevens, with the towers themselves and the antennas on the towers, does each provider own their own antennas or own towers?
So the antennas themselves are owned by the provider. The location where the antennas are affixed may be co-owned or owned by an independent vendor, and each of the phone companies are renting the space on it. So sometimes we will have only one company sell antenna at a location, and sometimes, especially in more populated areas, we will see all of the major carriers sharing the location. And if you were to go out and look at it, you would see multiple antennas on a single location.
So on the same tower, you could say having antennas for Sprint and for Metro PCS.
Well, not Sprint anymore, but yeah, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile.
I'll use AT&T and Verizon as my example.
Yes, sir.
Now, are the towers designed to be spaced out in a certain way?
So they're spaced out based on the need of coverage. So again, in more rural environments, they're significantly further away and the antennas can reach significantly further. So we would expect to see 6, 7, 10, 12 miles of coverage off of a single antenna. The more urban of an environment you're in, that becomes significantly smaller. We would expect, say in like Orlando, Tampa areas to see about a mile and a half outside of like the downtown, and in downtown to be sometimes like as small as a quarter of a mile of coverage per antenna. So it really depends on the landscape, and that's how the phone companies go in and lay out their network, dependent on the structural landscape as well as the population landscape of an area.
And are they designed so that the coverage from towers will overlap?
Yeah, so they overlap along all the edges. So we will see them placed significantly at strategic distances to allow for edge-to-edge overlap. So that way the old kind of dropped calls that we all used to experience isn't really a thing anymore. Very often, you might have some spots now and then, but those overlaps on all the boundaries allow for a seamless transition. So if you are either stationary in an overlap area, you may go back and forth between 2 or 3 antennas. Or if you're moving, as you reach the edge of one coverage, you would seamlessly hand off to the next in whatever direction you're traveling. So at any edge, we would expect an overlap of coverage.
So let me ask about the handoff.
Sir.
If I was driving up here from Daytona Beach, Florida, and I was on my cell phone from Daytona Beach all the way up to the St. Augustine area,
Yes,
would my phone be handing off to different towers as I progressed up I-95?
Oh, for certain. Yes, it would.
And you said that cell phones typically connect to the strongest, or they do connect to the strongest signal. That's what they're always looking for.
Yes, it's the best quality of service. So the strongest, cleanest channel available, which is typically going to be the one it's closest to, but there may be times where it's slightly further, depending on direction or need in that area.
Can obstructions or a physical object also cause an issue with it not connecting to the closest tower?
Sure. We see obstructions more in like downtown or urban environments with taller buildings, metal, steel, concrete, glass. And then we also see enhanced signal, so like the opposite effect, near water. So it would go further than you would expect it for 2 reasons. There's nobody really using the signal on top of the water, and the water is strengthening it and kind of pushing it across. So we kind of see the 2 different sides of the cell signal, both obstruction and enhancement.
In terms of the phone companies, what types of data do they keep within the all detail records that you were talking about earlier?
So they keep a lot of data, and sometimes it's not all in one file, it may be in multiple files, but typically across the board, what we will see is date, time, duration, both numbers involved in the communication, an indicator of which direction was it incoming or outgoing. Sometimes call features, like was it answered, was it not answered? So sometimes, depending on the carrier, you get some of that information. And then specifically, if it's requested in your legal demand, your warrant, or your court order, the location information. So what antenna was utilized for each of those events.
And in your work, at least for this case, did you have call detail records that you mapped manually?
I did, yes.
What does that mean when you map it manually?
So even though there is software available specifically to law enforcement that can analyze and map cell phone records, it's not always perfect. When you trust a computer software to do it for you, or on a map that we are placing the information on, it's a more accurate representation of the coverage of the antennas that are being used. Because now we are measuring how far out all the antennas are from each other to get a more accurate coverage area for each of the antennas.
And in this case, were you provided some call detail records to map?
Yes, I was.
What call do you know the numbers that you were provided, the call detail records?
May I refer to my notes?
I should look at our notes, Your Honor.
Let me do so.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, so I received 2 sets of phone records, one from T-Mobile and one from AT&T.
And the ones for T-Mobile, the phone records you received, were those for a phone number ending in 6399?
They were, yes.
And were those for Wallace?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would move pursuant to the business records certification previously filed with the court, the call detail records for 850-812-9031 from AT&T.
Okay, can you repeat the number again?
It's 850-812-9031, and that states X as in do not.
Okay, any objection? Without objection, admitted as evidence.
And that second number I read off, the records that just went in, was that the other number and records you were provided?
Correct. Those are the AT&T records that I analyzed as well.
And those were for purportedly Latera Bodison?
Yes.
And were you given any locations for purposes of your mapping as well?
Yes, I was. I was provided 3 locations of interest for the time frame in question that I was asked to map.
And what were those locations?
They were 133 Kingston Avenue in Daytona Beach. The second address was 7107 Northwest 4th Boulevard in Gainesville, which is a Home Depot. And then the last address that I was given was 8562 Smith James Road in Snellville, Georgia.
And were you also given a time frame to look at the records for these particular numbers?
Yes, I was.
For the number ending in 6399, what was the time frame you looked at?
Approximately 7:30 p.m. on the evening of June 23rd, 2021 through the end of the records. So about 5:30 in the morning, June 24th.
And what about for the other number, Miss Bodison's number ending in 9031?
For that number, it was asked for about whatever time it was at or near the Home Depot in Gainesville. So it started just shy of 1 a.m. the morning of June 24th through about noon that same day. So June 24th to 21.
And with the call detail records, the addresses you had, and the time frames, were you able to map the movements of these cellular devices?
I was, yes.
And did you create a report which was provided to the state attorney's office with that information?
I did, yes.
No, I don't believe there's an objection to states PP coming into evidence as the next numbered exhibit in Ms. Stevens' report.
Objection, admitted as evidence.
Permission to publish and have the witness step down.
May, make sure you stand on this side.
this, Ms. Stevens. Actually, on. Starting with this photograph, this is an item that's already in evidence. Is this part of the call detail records related to the number 6399 or the number purported to be Othel Wallace's?
Yes, so it's actually a separate piece, but it's part of like the package where you can see that every phone number is a subscriber page with all the account information. You can see here the number and then all the account details.
So this was part of the records that you received from T-Mobile for the number 6399.
Correct.
And does it have a subscriber name?
It does.
Who is the subscriber for that number?
Ophel Wallace. There.
Now we're going into your report. Is this just some of the information we already discussed, the time range, the two numbers, things of that nature?
Correct. So on the cover page, it's the time frame, the phone numbers in question, a note on the time zones, as the records are not provided in local time, so we need to convert them. And then additionally, since this is two separate numbers, they're color coded. So throughout the entire presentation, you see images in the black line and black shapes. It's always going to be the T-Mobile phone, and anything with blue lines and blue shapes is always going to be the AT&T phone.
So again, and this is the number. Right.
Correct.
And can you just tell us a little more about the time zone? So the records come in BTC.
Yes, the records are returned to us in BTC, which stands for Coordinated Universal Time. It's the time standard for the entire book. It's basically 0 hours. It's the same as Greenwich Mean Time or the military. It's mean time. And then for Eastern, we have to adjust all of it. So during the summer, we have 4 hours. So whatever is on the record, we need to subtract 4 hours. Then that was time.
Now let's go to the first slide. First, just tell the jury, what is this information?
So these 2 lines at the top are screenshots or image captures of what the T-Mobile records look like when we open them. The Excel digital file that's provided to us from T-Mobile. When we open it, that's exactly what they look like. So it's all information line by line.
And in mapping this, and this is for Othel Wallace's phone, the
Correct.
6399.
Yeah, for the T-Mobile phones.
When you mapped these calls, first just tell us what time range we're looking at and where these calls were, what towers they were utilizing.
So first, again, the records are in UTC. So even though it says 623, 2327, and 2344, we do have to back it up a little bit. So on every page, you will have time conversion with an asterisk. So here locally, it was 1927, so 7:27 p.m. And then the second call was at 7:44 p.m. Eastern. And then this is the call information. So date, time, duration, direction, the numbers involved in the call, some information about the subscriber and the device. Was it completed or not completed successfully? And then the last portion is the antenna numbers. So using this information over here, we're able to match these blue icons are all antennas for T-Mobile. We're able to match which antenna was in use for each call. And that's what's being represented by the pie shade wedges of the map.
And in terms of the antennas, would each, so for T-Mobile, what is that 3 antennas? So it would be technically 3 pies cover.
Yes, for the most part, everything in our jurisdiction is divided into 3. So every cell site represented by 3 sectors. And each sector is its own antenna. So it can be larger or smaller coverage than the one on the single cell site, because it's facing its own direction and it's operating independently, even though it's located at the same location, represented by the same antenna number and just sector ID, which one of the 3.
Now, just so the jury's aware, these, again, going to this one here, this pie-shaped pad, that doesn't represent an actual coverage area, right?
Correct. So the antennas are emitting radio frequency. So that's obviously not really like a hard and fast line. Not going to shut off and go too far past it. So what we're seeing with the lines along the edges, you would expect it to be more like the wings, or more like a cloud-like boundaries. But for a basic visual representation, this general area, are going to be covered by that.
And in each one of the slides we're gonna go through, so we don't go through it every time, you'll have the actual data at the top.
Correct, so the call records are always gonna be at the top. When we get to parts where there's both phone records, you go from both at the top, the time conversion, and then the outcome.
So again, with these two calls, what were you able to see with these two calls?
So at 7:27, the first call that we looked at is an outgoing call made from this general area. So this is I-4, and this is 44, and this is Deland.
So this is I-4 that's going,
This-
at the I-4, you said.
Yeah, so if you go this way, you go towards Orlando, and you go this way, you're going towards Daytona Beach. And then the second call, so 17 minutes later, you'll see the device utilize this antenna. So this is I-4, this is 95, it's portable right here. So it's a little bit south.
Let's go to the next slide. First, what time frame are we looking at for these two calls?
So now we're looking a little bit later. It's 19:52, so 7:52 p.m. through 8:11 p.m. And we again have two calls, both outgoing from the target device to other parties. And for these calls, the first one utilizes this antenna here. I apologize. Okay. The first call, so the one at 7:52 is utilizing this one, and then we go back to this one for 8.
And just for some reference points, is this the Daytona Beach Airport?
So this is the airport right here. This is International Speedway Boulevard. This is 95. This is US 1. And like the main East and Western Avenue.
Do you see the Kingston address marked on that map?
You can now see the Kingston address marked by the red icon. So it's not quite in our coverage area, but it's definitely in the area of the device. Generally.
Let's go to the next slide. What are we looking at here? What time frame?
So now we're a little bit later. It's 20:31 hours. So by 8:31 p.m. And then the next call at 8:52 p.m. Both incoming this time. The device utilizes the antenna here, which is right off of A1A, and facing back towards Daytona, so back towards the west. And you can now see that it clearly covers the general area. Avenue.
So the phone was in the coverage area of the Kingston address. Okay. Now the location's kind of changed here, fair to say?
Yeah, so you are now 3 minutes after, I apologize, 2 minutes after the last call that we just saw that was occurring on an antenna over here facing this way. It was clearly covering the Kingston address. And now by 8:54, the device is traveling west and utilizes first this antenna at 8:54. At 8:56, it utilizes this antenna twice, 56 and 58. And then by 9:01 p.m., the device is utilizing this antenna. This is 95.
So the device appears to be heading north up Interstate 95.
Correct, and the 7 minutes we traveled across this way and then this way. It was a very quick production.
And the next slide. First, geographically, what area are we looking at here?
So we have 95 straight in the middle. You can see South Palm Close and Flagler Beach come into play. So we are now north of where we just saw, and just a few minutes later.
So continuing, consistent with continuing to travel north up Interstate 95.
Correct. And we also see it traveling, hitting in a northern pattern. So first utilizing this antenna, and then utilizing this antenna. So the pattern of usage also comes into play for movement analysis. What order will we attempt to utilize?
A lot of calls here. What area are we looking at first?
So we're still in Palm Coast, but we're now north of Flagler, so the northern end of Palm Coast, progressing north again. The call pattern follows the same. Starting at the bottom of the page, this is the first calls, and then we use this antenna, and then we use this antenna facing southwest, and then we can see the same cell site, but it's the antenna that's facing north to northwest is utilized. So again, a south to north progression with 95 being on main road there.
And what time is the last call that's on this map?
So this one is 21:14 through 21:17, so that's 9:14, 17, yeah.
Going to the next slide, are we up in the St. Augustine area now?
Correct, so you can see St. Augustine, still along 95, and we're 30 or so minutes later. And again, utilizing first the southern facing antennas, and then the north and western facing antennas with our 95 coverage.
We'll go to the next slide. So what are we looking at? What area are we looking at in this map?
So this, we're getting up towards Jacksonville, South Jacksonville area. You can see here, and see prime picture right here. And again, you have 95 up through the middle. And again, the tower antenna usage with a southern to northern direction.
And what about here? What area are we looking at?
So this is kind of south west Jacksonville, Jacksonville here. So this is this is 95 over here. So this is like the outer kind of byway to go around, and then this is 10. If we just go around downtown Jacksonville, we come around this way.
I know.
I believe it's 295. I apologize. This table right here. Just a little blurry. So again, we're using a northwestern movement. So starting here, then here, then here, over the course of about 15 minutes.
Heading towards Interstate 10.
Heading towards 10. Yep.
Let's go to our next slide. What are we looking at here?
So this is like an hour and 10-ish minutes later. And now we see something different because now we are on 75, so more towards the center of the state, Ocala, upwards to Georgia area. And now we're traveling south. So we came across 10, presumably we don't have any calls for about an hour. But we're back, at least we know for certain we're back along 75. And now we're seeing antenna usage starting from the north and traveling south. And so until we're heading south, 75.
Would that be in the direction of Gainesville?
So from where we're starting in Columbia County, yes, you would be heading towards. And we can see it in this slide even better. We're at 11:46 p.m. to 11:54, so just only about 8 minutes or so. But again, we see a steady progression from north tower antenna usage to our south antenna usage, and then we do see our ultimate. So we're getting very close to Gainesville and the location of the Gainesville.
Going to the next slide. What do we see here?
The next 10 minutes, 30 minutes or so, and again, a north to south progression. So the device actually 75 right in the middle where it travels along that area and actually bypasses the location of the Home Depot and travels a little bit further south at 12:29 a.m.
And now, is this the first slide where we're seeing both colors?
Correct. So starting at 12:58, we have the T-Mobile device and the AT&T device in the same general area. So now we can see the Home Depot is right here, and we have the antenna usage between AT&T phone here and the black T-Mobile phone with the records right here.
And again, that's the phone for Miss Bodice.
Correct.
Going to the next slide, what are we seeing from the defendant's phone?
Activity mutually between both devices. So first we're seeing north of Gainesville. Now we're traveling back the other direction, headed north. 75 is right in the middle. And again, based on our antenna usages, we can see that we're utilizing the antennas in a south to north progression about 1
And what about on this side?
On this side, about 30 minutes after that activity, even further north. Here we can see 10. Here we can see 75. We have the AT&T phone utilizing For
What,
this one-
go ahead, what about this slide?
Yeah, so for this one, it's really nice because we can see within 3 minutes of each other. Both devices are along 75, and this right here, this yellow line is where- so we can see 75 from Florida into Georgia. We have both devices within a very quick time proximity, utilizing antennas covering the highway, and that's about 20 minutes long.
I believe the next slide is just going to be for demonstrative purposes. It's kind of unfortunate. This 75.
Yeah, so you can see 75 comes, it's really tiny right here, you can see it, it's up this way, right next to Valdosta, Tipton, right outside of Macon, comes this way, heading towards, it's about 75.
We'll get to the map in a second. Where will the phone, what major roadway will phone traveling down, traveling down once we get up?
Yeah, so once we get towards Atlanta, so you see the phones take the 285 bypass and then take 20 heading east.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we're moving it on the T-Mobile, the T-Mobile records didn't have anything during this time period. So we're relying on the AT&T records to look at our movement. But what we can see for this 50 minutes or so is steady south to north progression, utilizing antennas that cover presumably 75 based on timing. I would have to any other travel for the AT&T.
Again, heading towards the Atlanta area.
Correct.
Now on this slide, what are we looking at?
The same thing, so about 4 o'clock in the morning to 4:40, starting way down here at Bravado, going just outside of Macon, staying along 75, and then we also see it right here. So
Now on this slide, do we see both phones being mapped?
yeah, so for this one, again, within close proximity to each other, within about 6 minutes, both phones utilized a shared cell site. So we can see an example of the different phone companies. The structure where the antennas are located are physically the same. And then we have the AT&T antenna for the blue device and the T-Mobile antennas for the black lines for the T-Mobile device on the same structure at the same location, but using their antennas.
Is this the slide where they start to go down 20?
Yes, correct. So we can see, this is 675, which is a shoot off of 75 that kind of goes to the east and then hits 285, which is the bypass for downtown Atlanta. So it goes up and around. Where we see 675, 285, and then this is 20, which heads us. It's pretty east and west, but definitely is an eastward direction for the phones.
On this map, are we seeing the third location that you were asked to identify?
Correct. So about 5:30, between 5:30 and 5:50 in the morning, June 24th, you see the AT&T device approaching, and then at a shared coverage area between the two antennas that would cover our Smith James Road.
And again, this blue is for Ms. Bonison's phone. And on this slide, what are we looking at?
So for this one, approaching 6 o'clock in the morning, so within 8 minutes of the last activity that we just saw that was covering the Smith James Road address, and within 8 minutes, we see it traveling kind of southwest away from, again, along 20, heading back towards away from Smith James Road, very quick.
So this phone was not in the coverage area of Smith James Road very long. Okay. And what about in this slide?
So what we see in this slide is kind of telling two things. Location wise, we see the T-Mobile over here, pretty close to Smith James Road, but not covering it. They're really not covering it, but it's in general area along 20. And then we see the AT&T phone has already left the area. So looking at it map wise, it looks a little, a little odd that one's all the way over here and one's this way. But when we look at it analysis-wise, we see that these two calls on the T-Mobile phone, even though they're listed as outgoing, those are outgoing to voicemail. So that is not requiring the user to do anything to the phone. It's being routed by the network. And this is T-Mobile's voicemail. So the phone is on, it's powered on, but these calls will not answer. So this phone is sitting in this area, not being answered.
So it doesn't appear as if this phone may help.
I would, in my opinion, say no, because on the last time we did see the phone, about an hour or so prior, using the same antenna, outgoing call, connected call, they actually spoke, and there was some duration, and it was in the same area, so it never left that area. So I would say that that device never made it to see. Not any further than where it's right now.
Now, I'm going to go through these next couple slides a little quickly. Will they essentially show that Ms. Bodison's phone progressed back down 75 to Gainesville?
Correct. So we have no more activity on the T-Mobile device. So what we are seeing is the last one we saw were at the stationary just outside of Smith James, and then the AT&T launch traveling now north to south along 75 in Palo Midlake.
So you say no more activity on the defendant's phone, there's no more incoming or outgoing calls.
Correct.
It just could continue progression down 75.
7:30 in the morning to about 8:20 in the morning, steady call activity and data usage also in the absence of actual calls that are really along the highway.
And I think I might just jump up to,
Yeah, same thing. Just kind of goes, and then by 11:56, so just shy of noon, we have the device back in Gainesville.
and that's it. You return to the witness stand. Thank you, ma'am. Stevens, I actually don't have any more questions for you. I will tend to the witness.
No,
Oh, yeah, my demonstrative aid.
Ms. Stevens, the 51 Children's Way, that was the address that Mr. Wallace's phone was registered to?
I believe so, but I don't.
Well, if that was what was up on the screen just a little while ago, would that be correct?
If that's what was listed, I just don't recall what it said.
Okay.
But that would have been whatever T-Mobile had on file in the subscriber.
Okay, and are you aware that 51 Children's Way is a foster home where Mr. Wallace grew up?
No, I had no idea.
And I just want to be clear that what you just told us is Mr. Wallace went from Daytona Beach to Gainesville to Snellville, Georgia.
Through Jacksonville and then back south.
Okay, all the way up through there.
The devices, yes,
But he ended up going from Daytona to Snellville eventually.
correct.
Thanks for clearing that up for us.
No, no. Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Please state your name, sir.
My name is Brian Childs,
Spell it for the court reporter, please.
BRYANCHILES.
Sir, where are you employed?
I'm employed with Axon Enterprise.
What is Axon Enterprise?
Axon is a company that provides technology for law enforcement, including body-worn cameras, dash cams, and taser energy weapons.
How long have you been working at Axon?
I've been there 18 years.
What various positions have you had at Axon Enterprises?
I started in research and development as a electrical technician. I ran the validation test team for about 10 years. I was compliance manager for years. And now my current position is senior investigations engineer.
And how long have you been in that position?
Since January 2020.
On a day-to-day basis, what does that position require of you?
I conduct forensic investigations based on the products that Axon provides. So for other body camera or taser weapons, conduct analysis of the logs or any testing and produce a report, eventually possibly testify in court on it.
And have you testified in court on those items before, on that information?
Yes, I have.
You've been allowed to give expert testimony in the field of authenticity of Axon videos.
Yes, I have.
And when we're saying authenticity, what does that mean?
Authenticity is determining that a video has not been altered. It is as it was recorded.
And what specialized training do you have that allows you to do that task?
On the job work, I've been involved with design teams on the body worn cameras and doing the validation testing for many years. That was part of the validation testing to verify the product does what it is supposed to do.
Can you explain to the jury the process you go through to determine whether or not an Axon video is authentic and unedited?
There's some.
I just have a few more questions I want to get through, Judge. Not too many to go through.
The most reliable method would be what's called a SHA-2 hash. SHA, SHA is secure hash algorithm, and that is essentially a fingerprint of a digital file. The algorithm was developed by the National Security Agency, and it's used to authenticate any digital file. It could be a photo or a Word document or video. So if you generate the SHA-2 hash of a file, and then later it can be copied multiple times, put on a USB drive, sent to someone else. Later, if you generate that SHA-2 hash on that file, the copy, if the SHA-2 hash matches, then it's guaranteed identical copy.
And if something is altered, say even a second is taken out of a video, how would that affect the digital fingerprint?
The SHA-2 hash would change. I've done it before. I've changed 1 pixel of 1 frame of a video and the SHA-2 hash changes.
And in this case, we provided some items to take a look at to see if that digital fingerprint is authentic.
Correct.
What items were you provided, sir?
We have what's called the evidence audit trail. When a piece of evidence is uploaded from an Axon body-worn camera, the SHA-2 hash is generated automatically by the system after the upload is complete, and that's recorded in what's called the evidence audit trail.
And were you provided a body-worn camera video by the state attorney's office in this case?
I was.
Provided that Axon audit by the Daytona Police Department in this case?
Correct, yes.
And does Daytona utilize your cameras?
Yes, they do.
I have heard approach the witness, Your Honor. Can we see by identification? Do you recognize any initials on that DVD?
Yes, I do.
Whose initials are those?
That is mine.
And what is that DVD?
This contains the video recorded by the body-worn camera. Correct.
And is that the video, one of the copy of the video you examined in relation to the Axon audit?
Exactly, yes.
Are there an accurate representation?
Yes.
All the mechanical and see or on the actual examination?
There's no evidence of that.
Once you've had these items, the Axon audit and the video from Officer Jason Rayner, were you able to do that comparison to determine whether or not the Axon video was authentic and unedited?
Yes, I did.
And through that process, did you reach a conclusion?
Yes, I conducted the SHA-2 hash on the copy I was giving, and it matched identically to the SHA-2 hash printed on the evidence audit trail.
Now, I want to ask you real quick about signal sign-on.
Yes.
What does that mean, signal sign-on?
Signal sidearm is a product provided by Axon. It is a sensor that mounts to the holster of a firearm. And when the firearm is removed, the sensor senses that and sends out a wireless signal. Any cameras within range of that signal, if they're configured to, they can automatically start recording without the user interaction.
So one officer's signal sidearm can trigger another officer.
Correct.
During the interaction between the defendant and Officer Jason Rayner, was there any signal sidearm that was in the audit?
Yes, it was.
When the signal sidearm in their interaction, so those first 50 seconds,
In the interaction, no, there was not.
there was a later one around 8:54.
Yeah, about 4 minutes after.
May I have one more, Your Honor? Thank you, sir. I have no further questions. I'll tender the witness.
Good morning.
Are you familiar with any capability of the firearm holster sensor indicating that an officer is just moving his hand towards his duty belt?
No.
So in other words, if an officer was just going for the duty belt, there's no sensor that would enact a body worn camera into that capacity. Is that correct?
No, the firearm needs to be removed from the holster for the sensor to go off.
And similarly, does it have to be completely taken out of the holster in order for it to be engaged?
It depends on the holster and where the sensor is mounted. But basically the sensor will sense the metallic material on the firearm. So if it's removed enough that the sensor can sense that, then it wouldn't have to be completely removed, but enough to trigger the sensor.
With respect to the specific firearm and holster that was worn by Jason Rayner on June 23rd, 2021, do you have any specific information about how far the sensor was down in his holster?
I do not.
With respect to Mr. Rayner's Axon taser, same question as before, is there any sensor capability on the taser that would enact a body worn camera or other signal upon an officer just getting in close proximity with his hand to the taser?
No.
And with the taser, does the taser need to be removed entirely from the holster in order for a body worn camera activation?
Not entirely. Well, I'm not sure what model Officer Rayner had. There are certain models that trigger off of a holster removal and others that don't.
So you're not equipped with any specific information to give the jury about the actual model of taser that was possessed by Jason Rayner?
Correct.
And we heard a little bit in your direct testimony about an audit trail.
Yes.
Do you recall that testimony? Do you have a copy of the audit trail that you discussed?
I do not.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, this is the device audit trail.
All right. And can you go ahead and just take a look? Just, I don't know how many pages there are offhand, but just go ahead and familiarize yourself with that document and let me know when you're done.
Okay.
Have you seen audit trails prepared in that fashion before?
Yes.
Is there only one format that the audit trails come in?
Well, there's several different formats. Yeah, there's several different formats of audit trail.
And upon looking at it, does that appear to be the audit trail of Mr. Rayner's body worn camera on June 23rd, 2021?
Yes, it does.
And just please, you're far more professional in this stuff than I, so just please correct me if I'm wrong, but the audit trail has a series of items numbered 1 through 289.
Yes,
And you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but the item is corresponded with an event. Is that correct?
correct.
Right. And certain events would be, like, for instance, item number 1 is the audit log is created, correct?
Correct.
Right. And there are also indications of whenever the certain buttons on the device are pressed.
Correct.
And on an Axon camera, there is a power button.
Yes.
There's an event mode button.
Yes.
There are combinations of buttons that can be pressed to enable a sleep mode of the Axon camera.
That's correct.
And the normal setting for an Axon in most law enforcement agencies is that when the event button is pressed, the video goes back 30 seconds to capture the previous 30 seconds beyond the event mode button being pressed.
Objection, like,
Well, I'll ask another, Your Honor, may I ask another question? Yeah. Okay, you're an expert for Axon, right?
Yes.
And does Axon provide Axons for law enforcement officers? How broad? Across the country, across the world?
Worldwide.
Okay, worldwide. So you're familiar with many different law enforcement agencies and how they utilize Axon cameras. Is that the case?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, you can't pick out a specific agency and I can tell you what their settings are, but
Sure.
I know how they're used for the most part.
Understood. So when we're talking about pressing an event mode, and let's just talk with respect to the case that when you press the event mode button, there's a 30-second look back that happens, right?
Not technically correct.
Okay. Explain where I'm off.
Okay, so when the camera is powered on and in what we call buffering mode, it is recording video to a temporary memory, kind of like RAM in a computer. It's a volatile memory. And agency settings determine how much is recorded in that memory. So if an agency set for a 30-second buffer, then 30 seconds of video will be constantly recorded to the temporary memory. When the event button is double pressed, the camera will switch to event mode and start recording video into what we call permanent memory, and that's the main storage memory. At that point, it will take that 30 seconds of pre-event buffer that was in the temporary memory and save it to the beginning of that file.
So, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the only thing that I was missing is if there is enough memory to allow the 30-second buffer to be recorded, that's the only thing that prevents a lack of memory on the 30-second buffer.
No, because the buffer, there's always plenty of memory. Only the permanent memory can run out if you're storing too many videos. The only reason you would have a lack of pre-event buffer is if the camera was not recording to that buffer memory.
And one way to prevent it from recording is to enable a sleep.
Yeah, but so sleep mode puts the camera in a low power mode, and so it is no longer recording. And so, yeah, the buffering period, the buffering video is not being recorded at that time.
And there are a series of buttons that can be pressed on the body worn camera in order to enable sleep mode.
Correct.
And when those buttons are pressed, sleep mode is engaged, and thereby the 30-second buffer is not recorded.
Correct.
So in other words, if I were to press my body worn camera at 12 noon and sleep mode is engaged, the recording would start at 12 noon forward. Correct?
Yes, if you started an event right at noon and you were coming out of sleep mode, there would be no buffer and your video would start right at noon. Correct.
And we can move on, but just to make sure we're clear, if sleep mode is not engaged and I hit the button at 12 noon, then the recording would actually start at 11:59 and 30 seconds.
Assuming you were powered on for 30 seconds beforehand. Correct.
And are you equipped with any specific knowledge as to the Daytona Beach Police policy concerning whether an officer and under what circumstances can engage in sleep mode on an axon?
No, I am not.
You are familiar, however, with just the general policy that, you know, privacy could be an issue. Would you agree with that?
I agree. I don't,
Officers using the bathroom or something like that.
that would be one reason to put it in sleep mode.
And also power saving.
Correct.
And you've had an opportunity to look at the Axon audit trail of Mr. Rayner?
Yes, the device audit trail.
To me, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, to me, the unit started at 100% battery.
I believe so. Yes.
And the Axon battery life is what, 12 hours?
Approximately 12 hours.
Which is consistent with most law enforcement officers.
Correct.
I would imagine if you're marketing a product worldwide to law enforcement officers, you want to make a battery that lasts at least the entirety of the shift, right?
Exactly.
Be no reason to worry about battery life if I'm at 90% an hour.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
Okay. Are you familiar with what time Mr. Rayner came on shift on June 23rd, 2021?
I am not.
By inference, we can conclude that if there is an indication on the audit trail which shows that an event button is pressed, that would be consistent with Jason Rayner pressing the event.
Possibly. I mean, it could be bumping into something, presses it.
Okay. I want to direct your attention to the audit, but probably the more likely outcome would be Jason Rayner pressed the event button.
Most likely. I mean, in general.
I want to direct your attention to items 99 through 105 on the audit trail. If you could please find those pages.
Okay.
All right. And item 99, the time is 6:47 p.m. Do you agree with that?
Correct.
And there's an event button that's pressed on event item 99, correct?
Correct.
And at 6:47 and 38 seconds, 1 second after item 99, the event button is released. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but it wasn't a full second. It was a very small portion of a second.
Okay. And I appreciate you, like I said, I appreciate you correcting me if I'm misinterpreting something. So thank you. 101, item 101 at 6:47 and 40 seconds and I think 512 milliseconds, the power button is then pressed. Do you agree with that?
Correct.
Okay. On item 102 at 6:47 and 40 seconds, and then a few milliseconds later, the power button is released.
Correct.
On item 104 at 6:47, 41 seconds and 916 milliseconds, the select button is released.
Select button is pressed.
Select button is pressed, and then in item 104, just a few milliseconds later, the select button is released.
Correct.
Okay. And then at 105, we have at 6:47, 42 seconds and 550 milliseconds, sleep mode is enabled.
Correct.
Okay. And you would agree with me that the swiftness with which these buttons are pressed is indicative of intentionally pressing the buttons and enabling sleep mode.
Yeah, and this is the sequence that is followed to place the camera in sleep mode. The power button is a short press, and then the select button is a short press, and that will put it in sleep mode.
So at 6:47, let's just call it 6:47 p.m., Mr. Rayner engages his sleep mode. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And that would prevent then the next time that he initiated his camera from the 30-second look back being included on any recording. Do you agree with that?
If a recording is started, if it's taken out of sleep mode into event mode, then yes, it would not have a pre-event buffer.
Okay. Well, I'd like to direct your attention to item 110.
Okay.
Okay. And at item 110, sleep mode has been disabled, right?
Correct.
And then let's just move ahead to item 112. There's a recording that started. due to the button being pressed, right?
Correct.
So at 7:21 and 25 seconds, when the recording starts, there's going to be no 30-second look back there, right?
Correct.
And we're moving forward. The recording has started at 7:21 p.m. And then a few minutes later on 7:25, at 7:25 p.m., the recording has been stopped.
Correct.
And that could be consistent with Officer Rayner engaging a member of the public or being involved in some police function. Objection. Okay. What is a reason why a law enforcement officer would do a recording if they are on duty and have a body camera? Objection.
No, there could be many reasons an officer would record. I don't know their policy. I don't know.
What are some of the reasons why an officer would engage their camera with a member of the public?
It could be, he's asking questions of someone or someone's approaching him to ask a question. It could be that he saw something, maybe not related to a person. It could be a vehicle or something. There's so many reasons.
Consistent with a police function?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And in preparation for your testimony, did the state provide you with any of these collateral videos to see what was going on during those times?
I believe Daytona Beach shared a few videos prior and after.
Okay. So there's a few minutes of recording, and then the recording is stopped at item 114. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And then there's a title on on item 116, there's the title that's changed.
Yes.
Right.
You may proceed.
Okay, thank you. And on 116, there's a title changed in the event. Is that just consistent with a video being recorded in connection with the event button being pressed?
Yeah, that's after the video is recorded, the camera automatically, so while it's being recorded, the title is automatically changed to something more user-friendly.
And moving forward then, that event button was released, recording stops at 7:25, and then you agree that at 1:21, item 121, at 7:27 p.m., sleep mode is enabled again.
That's correct.
So just after that interaction, sleep mode is enabled, and then I'll direct your attention over to 152. Sleep mode is enabled again at 8:31 p.m.
That's correct.
Okay. And that would have been after an event button being pressed at 8:28 as indicated in item 144, a recording for just a short amount of time, and then sleep mode is enabled again. Do you agree with that?
So a recording was started at 8:01 and 37 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And then it stopped at 8:28 and 28 seconds. And then sleep mode enabled at 8:31 and 13 seconds.
And going back, there was another sleep mode activation at item 136 at 7:53 p.m. as well. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And you reviewed the authenticity of Mr. Rayner's body-worn camera footage that evening?
Yes.
And just off of my recollection, I believe the opening time on that is approximately military time, 50 hours. Do you agree?
Correct.
Directing your attention to item 167. Sleep mode is enabled just 2 minutes before Rayner's body-worn camera footage starts, right? At 8:48 p.m.
Yeah, approximately 2 minutes.
Going down to event 173, the recording is started due to a button press, correct?
That's correct.
And that's at 8:50 and 36 seconds.
Correct.
That would be the time consistent with Officer Rayner going into 133 Kingston.
What's 130?
I mean, that would be, forget about the location of it. That's consistent with the time that the video starts that you reviewed and authenticated, correct?
Correct.
And you would agree with me that when the recording was started at 8:50:36, sleep mode was enabled and we have no 30-second look back as to that interaction.
Correct. There is no 30-second buffer.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
Okay, any redirect?
Just very quickly, Your Honor. The last question about the sleep mode and the 30 seconds back, but once he double taps, the camera starts, right?
The camera what?
The camera starts.
Start,
Once he
yes.
double taps, and that's at the officer's movement and his choice to double tap and start the camera, right?
Correct. When he double taps, the camera switches from sleep mode to event mode and starts recording immediately.
Thank you, sir. Further questions?
All right, thank you. Any recross? Okay, may the witness be excused. Stay.
Yes.
Defense. Okay, you are released from the subpoena. Thank you. You speak loud and clear into the microphone. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell it for the court reporter?
Yes, it's Detective Matthew Smith, Matthew Smith, Smith.
What do you do for a living, sir?
I'm employed by the city of Daytona Beach as a detective with the Daytona Beach Police Department.
How long have you been with the Daytona Beach Police Department?
9.5 years.
And are you assigned any specialized divisions currently?
I am assigned to the Advanced Technology and Cybercrime Unit, as well as the North Florida Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force.
And were you a part of the same unit back in June of 2021?
I was.
Can you tell the jury generally what your unit does on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, so as far as the task force side go, we investigate internet crimes against children. On the advanced technology, we do digital evidence, extractions of cell phones, interrogation of video surveillance, analyzing and mapping cellular data from cell phone records along those bases.
As part of your work with digital evidence, does that also require you to have to be familiar with social media applications?
Absolutely.
Does that include Facebook and Instagram?
It does.
When your agency is seeking Facebook records or Instagram records or another social media platform, do y'all have to do a search warrant to get that information?
You do.
And in this case, did your agency seek and receive a search warrant for both an Instagram account and a Facebook account for the defendant?
We did.
When you all receive records from social media account, let's stay with Instagram, what format do you get those records in?
From Instagram and Facebook, those records come into a downloadable PDF report.
And do you pretty much have to scroll page by page through the report?
That's correct.
Are you able to search through the report using keywords?
That's correct.
And what types of materials are typically contained within the PDF that you get, again, for example, for Instagram?
Typically, they're going to have your basic user data information, registration dates, IPs of the registration, phone numbers attached, videos, photos that were posted or used, any chats, your basic information, and whatever activations or activity that was performed on those platforms.
And are you familiar with what an Instagram story is?
I am.
Can you describe that for the jury, what it is?
Yeah, so an Instagram story is a section of Instagram where you can post basic highlights or moments throughout your day that typically last about 24 hours.
And does Instagram typically preserve the content of a story?
They do not.
Is it kind of similar to what they do with, I'll ask this first, with Instagram? Can you use Instagram to video call somebody?
Yes, you can do video calls, you can do audio calls.
And does Instagram preserve the content of those video calls?
The content, no.
Did you review the Instagram records that were responsive to the police, to Daytona Beach's search warrant for Instagram?
I did.
How many pages were these records?
Little over 5,400.
And what was the account name or screen name that was associated with the records?
RBG Vibes.
Did those records contain photographs?
They did.
Did they contain posts?
They did.
Can you tell the jury what a post is?
A post is basically a news feed area where you can post either pictures or videos of something that you like or something that you want to state.
Could you also post, like, if you liked a quote from Winston Churchill, could you type that quote out and post it on Instagram?
You can.
Does Instagram also keep and preserve and provide messages or chats?
They do.
Can you explain to the jury what an Instagram message or chat is?
A chat is basically a conversation between two parties or multiple participants, logging whatever they want to say back and forth to each other.
Unlike the calls, Instagram to Instagram call using the app, you get that content, these chats.
You do.
Can I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, be careful about the fall part.
Approaching with states triple M, MMM, and states double O. Right now.
Yes. What has ruled on these exhibits before?
First, I'm going to move these items into evidence pursuant to the previously filed.
Okay, subject to our discussion, the items will be admitted as evidence.
Okay.
Do you recognize the 2 pages of that exhibit?
I do.
What is it? What are those 2 pages?
These are the first 2 pages of a search warrant return report. It has your basic information, as stated before, when it was reported or when it was generated, the vanity name or the username, registration dates, whether or not the account is still active, any phone numbers attached to it, and some IP logs.
Let me ask you first, what is the vanity name that's on those records?
The vanity name shows RBG Vibes.
And what is the registration date for the account?
That'll be October 26, 2020.
Now, is there a phone number that's associated with the account?
There is.
And what phone number is that?
It's 954-928-6399.
Now, in addition to looking at did you look at the Instagram records in their entirety?
I did.
And did you also take a look at the Facebook records as well?
I did.
Were you able to cross-reference that phone number between the Facebook records and the Instagram records?
I was.
And what did you see?
I found multiple times where the defendant had utilized this number by telling people in chats to call him at this number.
Fair to say over 100 times in the Facebook records
Absolutely.
and multiple times in the Instagram records?
Yes, sir.
Do you see a portion on those first 2 pages about kind of the current status of the account?
I do.
And what does that say?
It shows if the account is still active, it states false, and that the reason is disabled, and it was disabled June 25th, 2021.
And what does that mean when an account is disabled?
Disabled means that Instagram had actually stepped in and disabled this account.
Having reviewed over 5,000 pages of records from Instagram, does that account belong to Wallace?
It does.
Why do you believe that?
Through analyzation of the records, it shows different chats, photos, multiple chats of him recognizing himself being that. Through Facebook, there was posts of RBG Vibes front page stating that this is his account to let him and his followers know. where you can be, where he can be reached at.
I should ask earlier, have you looked at records like this before?
I have
Fair to say many times?
on a multiple times a day. Yeah,
And did you see any indication that this account belonged to anyone else?
I did not.
In regard to reviewing, you said there are photographs in the account?
Yes,
Fair to say dozens of photographs?
that would be correct.
Were you able, looking at the photographs in this account, to have an opinion whether which hand the defendant uses?
Yes, through analyzation of the social media account, I can determine that he is right hand dominant.
The witness could step down, Judge. I just want to go through the other exhibits with him.
Yes. Counsel, feel free to move about.
It's going to be public and composite, or sorry, it's now in the states. 45. So is this an example of an Instagram post, sir?
It is.
What's all this at the bottom?
So this is referencing metadata, gives a unique identifier for the post that was created. It shows basically the URL that connects it, the source, if it was published or not, and if it was maybe viral.
I should have asked you earlier, was this an account that was open for anybody to see, or was it private?
This is public access.
And what's the difference between a public access account and private?
So for public, if you go on to their platform or onto their page, anybody can see any type of material that's posted. If it's private, only the ones that are following our friends are able to see the content that's posted on that platform.
And what was the date that this item was posted?
This shows June 3rd, 2021.
And if you, go ahead, sorry.
13, 15, 11 seconds UTC.
There's a little bit of that you can see earlier. That's the standard, standard time.
That's correct.
So Eastern time would be 4 hours earlier.
For summer, it would be 9 to 12.
So it would be
9:50.
Could you just read the content, please?
Yes, the post reads, Johnny Bolton, understand we are at war. Johnny Bolton died at the hands of a trigger-happy SWAT team of Cobb County. These crackers are not far from seeing the blood of their own flowing thick in the gutters of America. It's war.
And this is that page number that's in the Instagram, right?
Yes, this page number represents what number this post is blocked in the return from Facebook, Instagram, in this case.
Second post here. Can you tell from this page of the Instagram records, page 1074, what date and time that post was made?
Yes, the date shows June 7th, 2021, 18:15 and 52 seconds UTC, which comes out to 2:15.
And can you read that content, please?
Yes. One day I will take great pride and honor in getting me some pig's blood on my hands and boots. If you can't feel this energy, following me is not going to be healthy for you. I pray against my enemy and wish death to all who are oppressive to the Black culture, Black power.
And again, on a public account?
Correct.
Next, I'm going to talk to you about Instagram pages 4249, 4250, and 4251. Generally, what did those pages contain?
That contains a snippet of a specific chat between two participants.
And was one of the participants the account user RBG Vibes?
That's correct.
And why do we see this in these pages? Why do we see this post again we just saw?
So this is basically a screenshot from the other participant that sent it to the defendant. He screenshot it from his phone, as you can see, with battery life and time. And screenshotted the post with the comment section there at the bottom and sent it to him to discuss about that post.
And this right down here, is this part of the post made by RBG Vibes?
Yeah, so you can set a post and then set caption underneath the post to kind of get further information on what you're posting about.
And what is the caption of that post read portion of that?
It states RBG Vibes. I know one day they're gonna try, and that day may be my last in the physical realm. I have accepted all. And then it says more. You have to actually click that to see further what was written.
If you were looking at the
Correct. If you're actually looking at this post.
online.
Correct.
Now, after that post, is that when the chat ensues between RBG Vibes and this other person?
That's correct. This chat is in reference directly to that screenshot of the post being sent to the defendant.
And that's going to be the next 2 pages of the exhibit here.
Yes, sir.
What day did all these conversations take place?
This shows that it was on June 7th, 2021, 18:19:05 UTC, which is directly after the time the post was made.
And what time does it go to?
It shows same day, June 7th, 2021, 19:13 and 44 seconds UTC.
So within about an hour, all those messages are sent back and forth.
Yes, sir.
Since they're all within an hour, I won't worry about asking you the times of each message. But for the content, does the content have the author or the source of the message?
Yeah, so the basic makeup of this is it's going to show you the author, which is the person that wrote the message or who it was coming from. It's going to show you the time and date that it was sent, and then the body reference of the actual verbiage or the actual message that was included in the chat.
And so this first message, who is it from? Who's sending?
A username Almighty Mad Max.
So that is not RBG Vibes of the event.
That's correct.
It's coming to.
Correct.
And what is the content of that message?
The content of the message or body of the message is LOL, you love getting banned.
And who sends the next message?
Almighty Mad Max again, followed with the body message being LOL.
So again, the other person says LOL. Are you familiar with what LOL? What LOL? And then who sends the next message?
Again, by Almighty Mad Max, the body stating, but I feel it 100%.
At that point, does the account RBG Vibes, the defendant, respond?
He does.
And what is his response?
And the body of that message is, fuck these crackers and their power, I'm speaking to them.
And does Almighty Max respond?
He does, and indicates 2 boxes which would resemble some sort of emoji that was sent back.
So Almighty Max sends some type of emoji.
Correct.
What's an emoji?
Emoji is basically a small character representing an emotion.
Can you give an example?
Such as a smiley face, they're happy with a smiley face. That might be the bear.
Thank you, sir. And what's the next message on?
That's from Almighty Mad Max as well, with the body stating, or the content of the statement saying huge facts.
So again, a message.
I'm sorry, huge facts.
And does RBG Vibes respond to that?
He does.
And what does he say?
The body of the message states, I know who's watching me and I'm talking directly to them.
Does the Almighty Max respond to that message?
He does.
What does he say?
We need your account to stay alive, though, brother. And then with some sort of emoji following as well.
So another, not with a smiley face, but some kind of.
Right, some kind of emoji following.
Okay. Does RBG Vibes, the defendant, respond to that message?
He does.
What is he saying in that message, the next message?
You right, fam. That's why I've been not tagging my whole tags and not saying too much. But bro, I want the blood for what they have done. I'm in June. They just killed another brother.
And who sends the next message after that?
RBG vibes as well, which is the defendant.
And the content, so go ahead, content of that message.
I hate that.
Does Almighty Mad Max respond?
He does.
What does he say?
The body states, say less.
And if he send another message after that?
He does. The body states more better talks in action in person.
I know we're kind of cut off here, but is the author of the next message RBG vibes?
It is.
Yours in the back will not be able to see that, you know.
Yes, for all. What's the content of his next message that sends Almighty Mad Max?
His content states that.
Does Almighty Mad Max respond to that message?
He does. It states these lines ran by the opposition.
Does the defendant respond to that message?
He does. I hope they listen. Fuck them, brother. You just don't know how close I am.
And what's the response by Almighty Mad Max?
I do, and you not alone.
And who says that?
Almighty Max sends another message stating chest though.
And who sends the next message?
Almighty Mad Max sends again, stating don't make it easy. Followed by another message by Almighty Mad Max stating for them.
And then does the defendant respond?
And then the defendant responds, bro, if they come for me, it's a message to y'all, bro, I'm not going back down though.
And what's the response from Almighty Mad Max?
Almighty Mad Max's response is facts.
And does he send the last message in this exchange on June 2nd?
He does. That states, we here for you.
That concludes the conversation on June 2nd. It does. Thank you, sir. You can return to the stand.
I do.
And one moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Detective, I have no further questions. I'll tend to the witness, Your Honor.
I think we'll like to take a lunch break at this time. And take our break until 1:30. We return at 1:30, reminding you not to discuss the case with anyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Detective Smith.
Good afternoon.
I think we can both agree about one thing, that Othel Wallace is very angry in the social media post that he discussed earlier.
That's correct.
He's seemingly venting his anger towards law enforcement officers. Do you agree about that?
Agreed.
And in reference to the first post that we discussed, he's angry about Johnny Bolton, an unarmed black man, being shot during an execution of a no-knock warrant in Pottstown, right?
Agreed.
You're familiar with who Johnny Bolton is?
I am not.
Okay. Did you consider the context in which Mr. Wallace made that post at the time you were investigating?
No, sir.
Similarly, there's another culturally significant event that's described in the comment. Do you agree with that?
In reference to the Johnny Bolton one?
No, in reference to George Floyd. In reference to Minnie?
Yes,
Okay. You recognize that as a comment to the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis, Minnesota?
I do.
And again, that is the context in which Mr. Wallace has made a mistake.
Objection, called.
You didn't consider the context of that statement in connection with your investigation.
Objection, relevance, and spec.
Can you describe to the jury what efforts you took to examine the context within which Mr. Wallace made the statement?
Objection, relevant.
And sir, we've talked a little bit about the Johnny Bolt situation and the George Floyd mentioned in the comments. You would agree that those were two events that were unfolding in the national landscape at the time of these clips were made?
You can answer if you know.
Sir, in reference to whatever the meaning the posts were,
I don't mean, I'm sure I'm not asking you for the meaning, I'm just asking whether you're aware of the timing that these two events were unfolding in the media in our country at the time of the post.
I was, yes. Yes.
Any other questions?
No, Your Honor, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. May the witness be excused.
You may, Your Honor, yes.
You may step down. Release from the subpoena, right? Okay.
Keep him, son.
Oh, hold on. May proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Afternoon.
Would you please introduce yourself to us?
My name's Mary Ripple. I'm a medical examiner and I'm an associate medical examiner and work for Dr. James Folser at the Volusia County Medical Examiner.
Okay, and how long have you been there, Dr. Ripple?
I've been in Volusia County, Florida since March of 2020.
How about previous employment?
Prior to that, I was a medical examiner in the state of Maryland for 20 years.
Okay. Briefly talk to us about your medical background.
Sure. In 1985, I got a bachelor's in science in toxicology from the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy and Science. Then in 1992, I got a master's in toxicology from University of Maryland at Baltimore. I completed medical school in 1996 at the University of Maryland at Baltimore. Then I did a residency in anatomic pathology at the Johns Hopkins Hospital, and I completed that residency in 1999. In 1999, I started a year fellowship in forensic pathology at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner for the state of Maryland, and then I was hired there subsequently in the year 2000. And I'm board certified in anatomic pathology and forensic pathology. I'm a licensed physician in the state of Florida.
Thank you, Doc. Why forensic pathology?
When I was in high school, we didn't have CSI back then. We had a show called Quincy Medical Examiner. I might be dating myself now, but I thought, man, there are doctors that try to figure out why people die. That's pretty cool. And then I got older and finally decided to go to medical school. And that's the kind of doctor I wanted to be, you know? I wanted to be the last doctor that somebody saw because, you know, then they can't speak for themselves. So maybe I can speak for them to try to be that sort of piece of the puzzle to search for the truth, figure out how and why they died. So that's why.
Thank you, Doc. And have you testified in court before in your capacity as a forensic pathologist?
Over 200 times, yes, sir.
And can you tell us approximately how many autopsies you've done?
Over 3,000.
Your Honor, I would tender Dr. Ripple to be allowed to make opinion testimony.
She's entitled to render an opinion.
Thank you.
May
Your Honor.
proceed.
Can you talk to us briefly, Doc, about what is an autopsy?
An autopsy is the complete external and internal examination of a body. And we're looking for disease processes. We're looking for injury. Also at that time, We might take some tissues or some fluids to do further testing on. And sometimes it's necessary to take evidence out of a body. So that's the reason.
And what's the purpose of an autopsy?
Also, I might say that photographs are taken during the time of the see stuff too, but the purpose of autopsy is to determine the cause of death.
Let's get specific, Doc. How about, do you recall performing an autopsy on Officer Jason Rayner?
Yes, sir. I performed the autopsy on the 18th of August, 2021.
Had he been in the hospital for a period of time?
Yes, he had.
Was he hospitalized from June 23rd of 2021 till August 17th?
Yes, approximately 55 days he was in the hospital. Yes, sir.
Let's talk about you conducting the autopsy. Walk us through how you received the body, where it came from of Jason Rayner, and what you did to begin your autopsy process.
What happens initially, we have forensic investigators in our office and they receive a call. So one of our investigators received a call from the nurse at Halifax Health Center saying that Mr. Rayner had been shot and had passed. So with that, she writes a report, gets information from the hospital, and then also gets information from law enforcement and any other sources of information and tries to get medical records. So that's the beginning part. So even before you start the autopsy, you've got to have some information of what's going on. So then the body needs transported from the hospital to our office, and we have a transport service that does that. And the body was transported to our office by them. They're put in a body bag, brought to our facility. Our gates outside our facility are locked. They're brought into outside the autopsy area and put in a cooler, and the cooler is secure in the building. So then the following day, the autopsy starts by taking photographs. So photographs are taken of his external body, both facial shots, full body, everything with therapy on, and then therapy is sometimes removed, and we take pictures after that. Taking pictures of any external injuries we see or any bodily features like scars or moles or tattoos, and then just the general, error when they got somebody. So pictures of pretty much everything externally. And then we, the body is opened up, big incision that looks like a wad opened up. And then we look for injuries or disease processes inside. As I'm looking at the body externally, though, I might see things. I might see certain injuries. So I'm taking measurements. Whatever I see outside, disease processes or injury, I'm documenting all that. Okay. And then you look inside to see if there's any injury that correlates with the result outside. Sometimes there are, and sometimes there are additional things that you find. And we document all that. And then body fluids are taken, and if necessary, set for testing for drugs and alcohol. But you had such a long hospitalization that really, toxic testing wouldn't really be by that. So we didn't send anything out for running out. And then I'm documenting everything. And when I document, then I'll go back and I'll write up the report and document all the findings.
Thank you, Doc. So let's get to specifics with Officer Jason Rayner. First off, you said you did an external examination. Did you find any injuries or wounds doing your external examination? And what did you find?
Yes, I did. I found healing wounds. I found lots of evidence of therapy, but I found healing. So, you start by reviewing the records. So the record said that he had an entrance gunshot wound in his left temple and there was a bullet. Right? So as I look, there is a scar. There's a scar right in front of his left ear. To me, it's consistent with a healed gunshot wound. Also looking around the wound for other things, for evidence of other stuff that comes out of the gun, but I didn't see any of that. I'm looking also, there's a scar here because the hospital had removed that bullet, right? So I make measurements from the top of the head and sides, and so you sort of connect the dots. This is where the bullet was found. This is where the bullet is, right? So then you look inside the head, and there was massive brain injury inside it also. He didn't really have any other external injuries other than that. He had the scar here, he had a scar here from the entrance, and then the scar here from when he took the bullet out. And then he had evidence of a what's called a craniectomy, meaning that he had a big scar right here and around here. What they did there was at the hospital, because of all the damage in his head, the brain swells, there's not room for anything. So they take that off, the brain has to move, so the pressure. So he had that. The other thing I noticed was he didn't have his left eye. The left eye that's in there was prosthetic and half over it because he had lost his left eye. So that's the other thing I noticed. Moving around his eye. He's also yellow. Yellow means jaundice, and that means there's liver failure somewhere also. So externally in general, that he had a tracheostomy tube, he had a dialysis catheter, he had a wound that was open on the skin but closed below on the belly. He had some drains in his belly also from medical intervention. So I'm looking at all that and I'm documenting all that. So those aren't injuries, but there's maybe some complications that happen. So that's why I need records. That's why I need to do the rest of the exam.
So Doc, you said something I want to make sure we clarify or cover. That is, sometimes you receive a body immediately after, let's say a crime like a homicide or murder, and the individual dies on the spot, and then you get the body right away, or within a brief period of time. There's no medical intervention.
Yes, sir.
And no medical records really to review. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
In this case, though, it was 55 days, and there have been several medical interventions, correct?
That is correct.
So did you review the medical records as well?
Yes, multiple medical records are. Yes.
Quite a mountain of them, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
So in this particular case, you did your examination, internal, external, but you also reviewed medical records from Halifax Hospital?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I believe that the defense has agreed. We do have a few photographs. If the defense agrees, I'd like to get them marked as State's Exhibit SS. I'd like to get it marked into evidence so we can have the doctor talk about it.
Okay. Without objection, they will be admitted as evidence.
This will be State 46.
Mr. Lewis, can you go on the podium and just put her on the?
Sorry.
Can you isolate that camera?
Yes, sir.
Or maybe, I don't know if you can.
I can make it, I can pin it.
Doc, with the court's permission, I'm gonna have you come down so that you can, we'll go through these photos.
Let me step down. Let me stand by. Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Okay, Judge.
What do you see on your screen? Just? Okay, all right. You step down.
Can everybody see it? Okay. Would you start with the bottom picture? What is that?
I neglected to say during autopsy, we also take postmortem x-rays or postmortem radiographs. And this is one taken at our office when Officer Mayer arrived. We do that first before we use the tape. So he has, you can see, he has no part of his skull here. That's a medical intervention again, because when he was shot, with such massive bleeding and damage in there, that such pressure comes up. Think about it, your skull is a solid ball, okay? So if stuff's in there, like bleeding and swelling, there's nowhere for that to go, so the brain gets pushed. So this is one of the medical interventions they use. They take off a piece of your skull so that the brain has some room to move, so it doesn't push on other important things like blood vessels and things like that, okay?
And Doc, would you consider that a life attempt to save Officer Rader?
Absolutely. If they wouldn't have done that when he arrived, he would have died that day. So, and then they also did other medical interventions I'll talk about later. But with regard to the X-ray, along the wound path, they entered the bow here, but again, the part of that skull has been removed, but I can see the scar on the skin. Okay. So there's all these little white specks going across here are all small fragments of the bullet. Now, the main bullet mass has already been removed at the hospital, I believe, in mid-July. And that was taken from right there. So the main bullet was here, but there's all these other fragments along there. And those fragments are embedded in what's left of his brain in the front, the bones in front of his face, and the bones in the skull. I actually was able to recover 3 of them at autopsy. So I have 3 fragments that I recovered at autopsy itself. In addition, the other, you can't see them that well, but the other little lighter pieces, not so bright white, are pieces of bone, also are pieces of bone that have been pushed in to the skull also.
Okay, and Doc, what about the top photograph?
Yeah.
If you want to reorient it, that's fine.
A facial identification photograph we take at the time of autopsy on Sterling Officer Rayner. He has black discoloration around his eyes, and that's because as the gunshot wound came in and lodged here, there's a scar, right? From where they removed that bullet, all right? So as it came across, it damaged the top part of the eye sockets, okay? The brain sits on top of the base of the skull, and the front part of the roots of your eye. You can actually feel them, you lift up like your eyebrow, okay? They're all smashed, okay? Not only are they smashed, there's hemorrhage around them that has remained there, and it's sort of a healing hemorrhage since the day that he was shot. This eye in particular looks a little dark here, and there's actually a little tear here. It's because this is not his eye anymore. They had to take his eye out because I'll explain the path what happened, but it basically killed that eye. They had to take it out. He's also a little yellow looking, all right? Jaundice. That means liver failure, okay? Build up with a chemical in the body called bilirubin, and that's why you get yellow and it's toxic. And that causes, that's one of the complications, later complications. But this scar there, that's the front part of that scar when they went around to remove that part of the skull.
Thank you, Tom. Let's go to the next one. Could you explain these to us, please?
Were embedded in the front part of the skull, right above his eye, and behind your forehead, were these 2 little fragments. So it's into your right skull bullet fragment, okay? And I removed those. And then this larger fragment, right frontal lobe. So you have 2 front parts of your brain, 2 lobes. So this larger fragment, I actually got out of the right side of the front of his brain.
You may have a moment, Your Honor. Well, Your Honor, I'd like to show you and put us to the briefly. Or if you could come this way. Let's take it. Probably this one. There you go. Do a little advance. Would you please look at this exhibit? It's identified as state exhibit TT. You recognize it?
Yes, these are the fragments that were put in envelopes that we just saw on the screen, and my name is actually on the back. I signed the back of these. So those are put in for evidence to give to the investigating agency. And that's what those are.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I have to be able to move in and evidence.
Without objection, admitted as evidence.
Permission to close the hearing, Your Honor.
You may do so.
Okay, would you please tell us about this?
Sure. So again, this shows Officer Rayner, the left side of his head. This dark area here is that scar, that healing scar from the entrance gunshot wound with his hair not shaved. Okay. And you can see he's yellow again. You can see he has a tracheostomy tube to help him breathe. This catheter here is the dialysis catheter because from day one he was at kidney failure and needed dialysis. So that is from kidney failure. The yellow is from liver failure, which was also there the first day that he was in the hospital. This is a closer up of it. This is the scar from the entrance gunshot wound. It corresponds to the hospital records. And to me, the scar is consistent with a healed gunshot wound. Okay. Then that craniotomy scar that came around the back of the head, you can see that that's part of that scar from where that part of the skull is.
And these two photos, please, Don.
So this is that scar from the entrance gunshot wound. It's had 55 days to heal. Okay. So I look around that. I look around the scar even before it's shaved. I look for the other stuff that comes out of a gun, like gunpowder, soot, things like that. But you know, it's been a while at the hospital and he's had medical intervention. But what happens when unburnt particles of gunpowder hit the skin, cause little scrapes, little pinpoint abrasions? Well, maybe I can see those little pinpoint scars, but I really don't see them. Again, he's had medical intervention. And this little thing here and this little thing here are more consistent with what? Suture marks to me when they sewed up the wound. So I don't see any of that on the wound. And I don't see a big blowout tears everywhere around it either. That I don't think you would see it right up again. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm not just looking at the hole, I'm looking at everything else around it and what it looks like and the shape of it. And I'm also reviewing the medical records. But I would defer to medical records because they saw it fresh, for lack of a better term. Okay. Then this is his left eye. Again, his left eye isn't in there anymore. When the bullet came across, it basically jumped out of the socket and killed the eye. So they had to take it out. So what's in there is not just
Thank you, Don. Thank you.
Are those the only photographs you're gonna use?
Yes.
Okay.
Doc, I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I'd like to jump to the manner and cause of death, and then I'd like you to explain how you reached those conclusions. Okay?
Sure.
So, were you able to determine, after your autopsy examination, with a reasonable degree of medical certainty, what the cause and manner of death?
Yes.
And what were they?
Cause of death is gunshot wound of the head with complications, and the manner of death is homicide.
And homicide means that one human being killed enough. Yeah?
Homicide's actually a medical term. It does. It means the act of one unconsciously. That is the definition.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. You said complications, and I think you touched on it a little bit in your testimony about the liver and the kidney. Could you start there? Start with the liver and explain to the jury how a gunshot wound to the head can impact so substantially on the liver of an individual, or on Officer Raymond.
All right. You obviously have the immediate damage of the bullet coming through the tearing the brain, breaking skull, all that, brain swelling, brain bleeding, etc. So when pressure builds up in the head, also say he lost blood through the hole in his head, and he also lost blood into his head. So he's bleeding, all right? And then there's something called a systemic stress response when you have head injury. So what happens is your body is trying to put all its power into the quote unquote more important organs, so your head and your heart. So not only is there hemorrhage and bleeding that's taking blood away from the other organs, your brain, because of the pressure buildup in there, is saying, whoa, these things below the diaphragm, I don't want them to get as much blood as my heart and the head are. So there's something called a hypoperfusion. It's called a shock liver or shock kidney. So these are not being perfused as much. And like I said, his liver functions and renal functions from day one weren't very good, and they went progressively down, up and down. Now, with the liver, it's really important because the liver makes a lot of important stuff, proteins, et cetera, that help with clotting.
Doc, you said perfusion. What did you mean by that? Lack of blood?
Or perfusion means flow there, lack of oxygen. There's lack of blood and oxygen getting to those organs. So what happens when that happens? The kidney cells die, the liver cells also die.
Did you see evidence of that?
Under the microscope at autopsy, yes.
What about the kidney?
The kidney showed chronic failure, yes, and like I said, he was on dialysis from.
Doc, I'd like to through some of your complications with you. How about the issue involving his stomach and bleeding? Could you talk about that a little, please?
Okay, so the liver, it all goes back to the liver. And why is the liver bad? Well, because of the gunshot wound to his head. Everything goes back. The whole chain of events started because of that gunshot wound to his head. Okay, so his liver's bad. Liver makes almost all the proteins you need to make your blood clot. It also makes a bunch of proteins that break up those clots. All right, normally the liver's in nice balance, has a lot of living cells, it's happy. Well, his liver is damaged already, and you have less reserve. So any little tip of your condition, any little inflammation, anything, you're gonna clot, you're gonna bleed, you're gonna clot, you're gonna bleed, you're gonna clot, you're gonna bleed. And throughout his whole hospitalization, it was like one step forward, two steps back, two steps forward, one step back, when we just don't have enough reserve. So we had 3 episodes of major bleeding. Ms. Valorza is talking about the first episode of major bleeding, okay? And that was on the 9th of July, okay? Where he has a tube in his stomach, okay? Not only did I show you the trach tube and the dialysis catheter, he has a tube in his stomach because he can't take anything by mouth, okay? So he has a tube in his stomach. He, the word used in the medical records is incidentally or accidentally pulls it out, okay? When he did, caused a lot of bleeding in there, okay? But it's not just from pulling that tube out. When they went in to check, the surgeon's records, both the surgeon's records state that in the area where that tube was pulled, of course, there's a tear, and that blood's going to, you know, that's going to contribute, but the stomach was already damaged in that area, okay? Ulcers, little ulcers and hemorrhage all around it, okay? So it's not like a normal stomach wall, so it's thinner, more susceptible to injury, and it's already ulcerated. Well, what does that come from? I'm taking the surgeon's words. They're called Cushing's ulcers, okay? You only use the term Cushing's ulcers when the ulcers are a result of head injury. You're saying, well, how in the heck do you get ulcers in your stomach when you got injury to your head? Okay. Well, what happens is all that buildup of pressure, okay, from day one, pushes on very important parts of your brain. One area called the hypothalamus, one area called the brainstem, but pushes on important areas that stimulate a certain nerve. That nerve is called cranial nerve and it's called the vagus nerve. What is that nerve? Causes acid secretion in the stomach, okay? So that buildup of pressure, pushing on those areas, stimulates that vagus nerve. Now it's acid, 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 acid in the stomach, and what happens? I think most of us know stomach acid causes ulcers. Because that area is already damaged, and the words are from the surgeon, from the medical records, Cushing's. So that's where that bleeding episode came from. He recovered a little bit after that also. It was 39 days he lived after that incident, but he had 2 other major bleeding episodes.
Talk about this, please.
The other major bleeding episode. The second episode of bleeding was on August 11th, where he threw up a bunch of blood, and then he had a very large bloody bowel movement, okay? So again, they go back in and they're trying to look what's going on. They didn't put the tube back in the stomach. They actually had to take part of the stomach out, okay? When that first surgery, they put the next feeding tube was put in the skull back, okay? Well, they're going to look around in there too. They didn't see any ulcers, but they just saw clotted blood around it. And when they went in, there wasn't any active bleeding or anything, so they were able to stabilize them. He got a little better after that. So that's the second major episode of bleeding, all right? All this is putting stress on the body, obviously, in this organ. Third major episode of bleeding happened on the 14th of August, and that's the main episode of bleeding from which he had no more reserve and could not recover. But what happened was, initially, remember, the bleeding was on this side, called the subdural under the covering of the brain. Well, this time he had to bleed on this side of his head. So the final thing was that bleeding on this side of the head, that again, built up a bunch of pressure, okay? And when that happens, the brain's trying to escape. It can escape a little bit through here, but the brain it was pushed out as far as it could go through there. And then it tries to curve around and it herniates, meaning it squeezes in places it shouldn't go around that covering on the brain, and also tries to push down into the spinal column. There's a hole there where the spinal column comes through. And what happened with that big bleed on the 14th of August, major bleed on this side of the head, again, increased pressure, cutting off little blood vessels. So as the brain is pushed down, all the little blood vessels on the bottom are they're squeezed, okay? So what happens when you squeeze a blood vessel or have a block in it, you get a stroke, okay? So he got multiple little strokes after that. So that last bleed on the 14 was it. He could not compensate anymore, and he went into multiple failure continued, and that's when he died only a couple days later.
Doc, let's talk a few minutes about some other issues that are part of your autopsy evaluation. You've talked about the gunshot wound, and you've identified for us the entry wound. Talk to us a little bit, if you can. First, were you able to determine the path or trajectory of the projectile or bullet, and if so, how so?
Well, I look at the medical records if they help in any way, but I have 2 scars that I can connect, okay? I don't have a lot of bone left over here because of all the fractures that occurred and whatnot, but I have a scar right here, right? That's where they got the bullet from. Then what do? Connect it up. So where is this? So it's left, right, and a little bit back to front. It didn't seem, if you just connect the scars, that's it. It doesn't seem to be a lot of up-down deviation. So primarily left to right, a little bit back to front. Really not a lot of up-down.
Okay, so when you were pointing to the left temple, that's where the entry wound is.
Bullet.
Okay. Let's talk about the proximity of the gun, the 9mm. Let's talk about close contact. I think, and if you need if the photograph will help you, we can bring it out again. But I'd like you to explain to the jury what you're looking for and what you think.
All right, for distance, obviously it would have been better if I was seen right away. So on all distant things, I would defer to the clinicians who saw the wound, okay, because they saw it fresh. And then a contact, so you can have the barrel of the gun right up against your head tightly, all right, or you can have farther distances away. When the barrel of a gun is up against the head, because there's not room for the scalp to expand, if it's up there tight, you're going to get a lot of little blowout lacerations around it. Okay, it's a small hole relatively, and the hospital records don't mention that, but again, he's had medical intervention, I would defer to them. The other thing, if the muzzle of the gun is up against the head, usually away, not always, but usually away from the wound, you're going to get a little abrasion, little circular, semicircular abrasion. From what? The muzzle imprint is going to leave a little mark. Okay, I didn't see any separate scar beside there that looked like that to me. Also, I'm looking inside the wound because all that, not just the bullet comes out, all that burnt particles of gunpowder and unburnt particles of gunpowder, they were going in too. Okay. He's had a lot of surgery. He's had debridement. Debridement means they've taken dead tissue out. They got to take it out so the wound heals and so he doesn't get infected. So that might all be removed. I might not see it. That's why I would defer to the physician. But Externally, it doesn't look like a contact to me. Can I really tell for sure? No. I did then look under the microscope. I didn't see any black stuff in there at autopsy, but then I looked under the microscope, there to see if I seen any black stuff. There wasn't anything under there that was definitive. So I looked, but did not find. I can't honestly tell distance, but what the external features of that scar are not consistent with a hard contact gunshot.
With a hard contact, you mean actually local to the head?
Yeah, hard and pushing, yeah.
Did you see anything in the medical records, one way or the other?
I didn't see anything, but you know what? They're trying to save the life, so sometimes they note things, sometimes they don't. But just like I said, to be honest, I can't tell definitively, but I would defer to the clinician. They should be able to see all that stuff, right?
So after you've got contact, hard contact, what's the next level of separation?
The next is a couple inches away, like 6 inches or so. It all depends on the gun, okay? But this rule of thumb, about 6 inches, all those burnt particles of gunpowder are going to hit the skin and it's called. Okay, so it's the burnt. So it's like little black smudge around the wound. Okay, I didn't see any of that. Well, they would have washed that away for sure at the hospital. Okay, but you're not going to leave black smudge around the wound. And so I didn't see that. So I would refer to the clinician. Next. One's a little farther away. Again, depends on the gun. Rule of thumb is 2 to 4 feet or so. Now you have not just those burnt particles come around 6 inches. You have unburnt particles of gunpowder coming out. When they smack against the skin, because they stick there with a little frame, okay? You'll get little pump tape or pinpoint abrasion, okay? 55 days. Whew. As I showed you in the picture, I don't see anything really consistent with that. Are the clinicians going to see that? I don't know. Okay, but I would prefer that. But I didn't see any small scars around the wound. So, and then far that as a distant shot wound, which I
Okay, and then you've testified to hard contact, and now
close range, which is the soot, which is 6 inches, and then intermediate range, which is 2 feet or so away with the gunpowder stippling hitting the skin, and then distant.
okay. So I believe you're testifying that you didn't see any stippling.
Did not see stippling.
And of course, you also indicated that it was 55 days later and there were a lot of medical interventions, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you really can't say if there was any or not. You defer to the medical.
Yes, I did. I cannot say.
Okay. And I believe you said, correct me if I'm wrong, that as far as close contact, you didn't see any evidence of that, and that was less likely it was a close contact wound or hard contact?
I cannot tell definitively, but that scar doesn't look like hard contact.
Okay. Let's talk for a minute about where Officer Rader was and where the defendant was. Can you really testify with any medical certainty or tell us what the positions are?
No, I cannot.
And tell us why.
Well, I don't have anything going on the body because of, time passed and medical intervention. And I was able to get that video, and I can't tell. It's too dark. Can't tell. So.
And the bodies move?
Yeah, bodies are moving. There appears to be some physical interaction going on, and you just can't. I can't tell personally. I can't.
There was some mention in your autopsy about COVID. Did you, with Officer Rader? Talk about that for a minute.
I just got to refer to my notes so I get the my autopsy report, so I get my dates straight. So I guess he's shot on the 23rd, and on the 25th he has a COVID test that comes up positive. Okay, but that's the nasal swab that we all don't like. And then he's retested again that same day, and he's retested the next day, and they're negative. And then that's PCR test, so that's the gold standard. So the hospital thought it was a false positive. I thought it was a false positive, but you know what? I looked at microscopic sections of the lungs, okay? Because he did also, in addition to that brain bleed, he had pneumonia at the end too. Because he had some bacteria growing in there, he aspirated a little bit. Looking at the lungs, and unfortunately, I've seen enough COVID lungs to know what COVID looks like. So looking at it under the microscope, it was consistent more with an.
Was it medically, was it surprising to you that Officer Rayner hung on for 55 days?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
I asked if it, from a medical point of view, was it surprising or what her impression was of the fact that Officer Rayner lived for 55 days?
Overall.
Dying is a process. Okay? And as I stated before, he rallied, he had one step forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward. You can't predict a person's, ability to compensate for an injury or their response to therapy, et cetera. But he had pretty devastating brain injury, and I am a little surprised that he lived that long.
Is there any doubt in your mind, that Officer Rayner died from the gunshot wound that was inflicted on him by the defendant on June 23rd, 2021? Attend to the witness.
I think any cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Did you watch the body worn camera footage in this case? You talked a lot about the complications that Mr. Rayner had as a result of the gunshot wound. Do you recall that bit of testimony? And would you agree that there's nothing about any of the complications, whether it be bleeding or liver issues, that shed any light on positioning of Mr. Wallace and Mr. Rayner at the time of the shot? Okay. And same question as it goes to in terms of the trajectory of the proximity of the gun. The complications don't offer any support for any theory on either side, right?
That's correct.
And you mentioned that the trajectory was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're classifying more in the general sense of left to right and back to front.
Yes, inside the body. Okay, so inside the head, it's left to right, slightly back to front. Yes, sir.
And from what you're able to tell, a millimeter of difference of the position of the gun could have changed. That's what we're talking about here. I mean, millimeters, inches. How much movement in the gun really affects a trajectory?
Well, it's not just movement of the gun, it's movement of the person holding the gun, and it's the movement of Officer Rayner's head. There's a lot going on that alters that, yes.
So it's not fair to draw any real conclusions on the positioning, even from the trajectory.
Sure. Yeah.
And it doesn't look like, I'm familiar with the term point blank, but I think you were describing it as contact if the muzzle of the gun was up against a person's head.
Point blank could be multiple things, but that's one of them. Sure.
All right. And we can't necessarily rule that out, but it seems like that's based upon the observation of the injury, probably an unlikely scenario. Okay. And you can't necessarily say it was 6 inches, 12 inches, 2 feet, 4 feet.
I can't.
And is there anything in terms of the medical analysis that you performed that would disprove a claim of self-defense in this case?
Nothing to do with what I did.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
I think, can you read, right?
Yes, sir.
May the witness be excused, state?
Yes, sir.
Defense?
Yes.
You're released from the subpoena. Thank you. Next witness? You may proceed.
Whenever you're ready, sir.
All right.
Can you please state your entire name?
My name is Timothy Brian Petrie,
And can you spell it for the court reporter, sir?
TIMOPHYBRYANPEETRE.
Where do you work, sir?
I work at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I'm in the Orlando Regional Operations Center.
And how long have you worked with FDLE, sir?
32 years.
What is your current position at FDLE?
I'm a senior crime laboratory analyst in the biology and DNA section of the lab.
Do you work in the same section as Corey Crumley?
Yes.
You guys pretty much do the same job?
For the most part, yes.
Most part, okay. Can you just briefly explain to the jury what your duties are on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, I'll examine items of evidence for cases that have been submitted by local law enforcement agencies. What I'm specifically looking for are body fluid stains, materials such as blood, semen, saliva, hair, skin cells, things like that. When we find those items, we then perform DNA testing on those items and then compare that DNA information to DNA information from individuals that may be involved in the case.
Can you tell the jury about your training in the field of working with DNA?
I completed a forensic serology school with FDLE. Serology is the identification of body fluid stains and things like that. I completed a basic serology school with the FBI Academy. Then I completed the 2-year-long training program in DNA analysis with FDLE. And then ever since then, as DNA technology has evolved, we undergo training all the time. As the technology changes, we get trained or retrained and newly trained in the advancements in DNA testing.
When it comes to your work doing DNA analysis, how does statistical analysis come into play?
Statistics are used anytime we have a DNA match or an inclusion. Anytime there's a question evidence sample that I've derived DNA profile from, and I have included or matched somebody to it, we give a statistic that in the form of what's called a likelihood ratio that will give you an indication of the likelihood of somebody's inclusion into that mixture.
So that kind of go to the certainty of the match or the comparison?
In common sense words, yes. It's basically a statistical weight to the declaration of an inclusion or a match.
Are you familiar with proficiency testing, sir?
I am, yes.
Does your agency do that?
We do.
And what is it?
Proficiency testing is testing of samples that are given to us from an outside agency. We perform our work on it just like we would a normal case. We send off the results, and then we are informed whether or not we passed that test. We do that twice a year, and the agency is, or the samples come from an agency, not FDLE or any other law enforcement agency. It's a commercially purchased test that we take.
Have you been allowed to give your expert opinion in the field of DNA analysis and identification in Florida courts before?
Yes, I have.
How many times have you had to estimate?
Testified over 200 times, and probably at least half of those have been involved with DNA testing. I can't give an exact number anymore than that, but yes.
At this time, I'd ask that this witness be allowed to render an opinion in the field of DNA identification and analysis.
He'll be allowed to express his opinion.
Doctor, the jury's heard from Corey Crumley. Do you use the same testing procedures that Corey Crumley uses?
I do.
The same 4-step process to analyzing DNA?
Yes, exactly the same.
And let's get right into some of the items of evidence you received in this case. Did you receive multiple submissions in this case from the Daytona Beach Police Department?
I did 3 separate submissions.
And when you receive a submission and you finish working on it, do you put your findings in a report?
I do.
And is that report provided to both the agency and the state attorney's office?
It is, yes.
And does FDLE assign their own case number to a case?
We do.
And if you're the assigned analyst, are you going to do everything on that case once you're assigned to it?
Typically, but there can be instances where another analyst may be involved in a portion of the work or later submissions to that same case, things like that.
And that kind of happened in this case, didn't it?
It did, yes.
After she did the initial work, did you do everything else in relation to this case in terms of DNA analysis and identification?
That's correct. Yes, I did.
And did you issue 3 separate reports based upon your analysis and identification?
Yes.
And let's just go report by report if we can. Do you have your reports with you, sir?
I do.
Okay. Let's start with the report that you issued on August 16th of 2021, sir. You got it?
I do.
What items were submitted from the Daytona Beach Police Department for that?
There were two items that I performed testing on: a firearm, a Glock 17, which had a magazine and 16 rounds in the magazine. And then the second item was a casing, a Hornady 9mm casing.
Can you tell the jury how you went about, let's start with the casing, how you went about analyzing and looking at the casing to see if you could locate any DNA?
Essentially, what I did was just physically look at the item, make notes of what I saw, and then took a long stick with a cotton swab on the end of it, basically a long Q-tip, swab the head end of the cartridge and the surrounding area of the head stamp. And then from that point on, I was literally just taking a cutting of that swab and performing DNA testing.
And do you take it through the same process that you and Corey Crumley would take any item you're analyzing for DNA?
Yes.
And how did that go? How did the analysis go?
On the casing, I did not receive enough DNA on the swab from that item to even continue the full DNA test. Part of the process, we determined how much DNA, if any, is present. And when I did that on this, there was not enough DNA to warrant further testing because I would not get a result from that.
So it wasn't that there was no DNA, there just wasn't enough to take it through the full process.
Right, there's very little trace amount quantity wise and not enough to do the test.
Okay. And let's talk about the firearm, the Glock 17. Did you kind of do the same thing with the Glock 17, look at it and decide where you should swab it?
Yes.
And typically with firearms, where do you swab?
We swab from what we call the textured areas, which would be the grip, the trigger, the slide, areas where one that would handle the gun would have touched. And then in addition to that sample, I also took a sample from the barrel or the tip end of the gun. So two separate samples were run from the firearm.
Let's talk about you said the tip of the gun or the handle of the gun?
Barrel.
The barrel, sorry, the barrel of the gun. When you swabbed that and took it through your testing procedures, what did you find, sir?
I obtained just a very small amount of DNA information, and it's so limited that it's not usable to interpret or use for any comparisons.
And what about the swab from the textured areas? Did you take that through your 4-step testing process?
I did.
And what did you discover, sir?
I obtained a DNA mixture consistent with 3 donors, including at least 1 male, and then stated that DNA information is suitable for comparison.
So if you had a known sample, say from a buccal swab or a blood stain card, would that be comparable to what you recovered from the textured grip of that Glock 17?
Yes, it would.
And was that everything in your first report on August 16th of 2021?
It was, yes.
I think you can correct me if I am wrong. Your next report was August 31st of 2022.
That is correct.
Did you receive an additional submitted item that was the basis of that report, sir?
Yes.
And what did you receive?
Those were the buccal swabs represented me from Wallace.
And when you get buccal swabs from a law enforcement agency, do you take them through the same testing procedure?
Yes.
And did you do that with these buccal swabs?
I did.
Were you able to get a complete DNA profile from the buccal swabs of both the Wallace?
Yes, from those buccal swabs, I did get the complete DNA, known DNA profile from Wallace.
When we say complete DNA profile, what does that mean?
It means we test at 21 different areas to get DNA types, and I received information, complete information at all of those areas that we test for.
And did you make comparisons from that complete known profile to an item actually previously analyzed by Corey Crumley?
Yes.
And what item was that?
It was a hat.
And when you compared it to was it a mixture from the hat?
It was a mixture. She reported a mixture of 2 individuals on that hat.
And it was suitable for comparison?
Yes.
When you compared that to the swab or the DNA, the known DNA for Otha Wallace, what were your findings, sir?
My findings for that comparison to Otha Wallace were inconclusive. I could not determine whether he was included or excluded from that mixture. To the two-person mixture, but the second donor is very limited and not able to say whether or not he's included or excluded to the hat.
Could you even tell whether or not he was the primary donor to the mixed profile?
I can't say anything because his sample compared to the hat is inconclusive.
Okay. And what about the mixed profile you got from the textured grip of the Glock 17? Were you able to compare that to Othel Wallace's known DNA?
I was, yes.
And what were the results of your comparisons there?
Othel Wallace is included as a possible contributor to that DNA mixture from the textured areas of that firearm.
And did you take that through a statistical analysis that you described earlier?
Yes.
And can you tell us what the results of that statistical analysis were, sir?
The observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Othel Wallace and two other individuals, as opposed to originating from 3 individuals.
So let me break that down a little bit if we can. So it's 700 billion times more likely that that mixed DNA profile is Othel Wallace and 2 other people than just 3 other people. Without Othel Wallace, I should say.
Close, but we can't state it that way.
Okay.
The DNA sample, the DNA mixture that I obtained is 700 billion, is greater than 700 billion times more likely if it includes Othel Wallace and 2 individuals or 3 other individuals.
Okay, than 3 other individuals, you're right? 700 billion times more likely than 3 other individuals.
3 individuals, not including
Okay,
Othel Wallace.
there we go. Thank you, sir. Did that conclude your report of August 31st, 2022?
It did, yes.
Let's go to your final report on May 2nd of 2023. Did you receive several additional items that were the subject of testing and analysis in this report?
Yes, I received 4 separate items.
What did you receive, sir?
An FTA blood card represented as being from Jason Rayner, which is a dried down sample of his liquid blood. And then 3 swabs, I believe from a vehicle that were named rear H, rear hatch, and rear tire sidewall.
Let's start with the bloodstain card of Officer Rayner. Did you take that through the 4-step process of DNA analysis and testing?
Yes,
And what was the result of that, sir?
I obtained a complete DNA profile for the sample coming from Jason Rayner.
So just like the buccal swab you got from Othel Wallace, you had a complete profile.
Yes,
Let's start by talking about item 8, the swab from the rear H. Did you take that item through your DNA testing process?
I did.
And what was the result of that, sir?
I obtained a partial DNA profile from a male individual from that sample.
So this isn't a mixture this time.
No, it's single source, meaning from one person. But it's a partial profile, meaning I did not get the entirety of the 21 areas that we test for.
Was it suitable for comparison to a known profile?
Yes,
And did you compare it to Officer Rayner's known profile that you had from the bloodstain card?
I did.
And what was the result of that comparison?
The partial DNA profile matched the DNA profile from Jason Rayner.
And did you assign a statistical likelihood ratio to that?
I did.
And what was that, sir?
The observed partial DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Jason Rayner than from an unrelated separate individual.
And that 700 billion times more likely, is that the highest reporting threshold you guys go for reports?
It is. We cap the numbers that we give at 700 billion. The actual number is greater than that. We cap it at 700 billion, which roughly is 100 times the population of Earth.
Thank you, sir. What about the swab from the rear hatch, item 9? Did you take that through your DNA testing?
I did.
And what were the results of your analysis of that item?
Same thing. A partial DNA profile was obtained from a male individual for that sample.
And was it suitable for comparison?
Yes,
Did you compare it to the known profile for Officer Jason Rain?
I did.
What was the result of your comparison?
That partial DNA profile also matched the DNA profile from Jason Rayner.
And did you assign a statistical likelihood to that?
I did.
And what was that, sir?
Again, the observed partial DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Jason Rayner than from an unrelated individual.
Did you also make, as part of this final report, some comparisons to items that have been previously tested?
Yeah, yes,
Did that include the hat that Corey Crumbly tested?
yes.
Were you able to compare Officer Rayner's known DNA profile to that mixture that was on the hat?
Was, yes.
And what was the result of your comparison?
Jason Rayner is included as a possible contributor to the mixture from the hat. And that mixture DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Jason Rayner and an unrelated individual than from two unrelated individuals.
Again, the highest reporting ratio you can have.
Right, the greater than 700 billion, yes.
And finally, did you compare Jason Rayner's known DNA profile to your previous findings from the textured areas of the Glock 17?
Yes.
And that was a mixture of three, right?
Correct.
And what were the results of comparing Jason Rayner's known profile to that mixture on the Glock 17?
Jason Rayner was excluded as being a contributor to that mixture from the Glock 17.
And what does that mean, excluded?
In his DNA profile, his DNA information was not part of that mixture of three people.
Just one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Judge, the defense is willing to stipulate in the swabs from the textured areas and the barrel area of the Glock 17, which was collected by Mr. Petrie, states VB for identification.
The item will be admitted as evidence without objection.
Just have one more moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Just want to direct your attention to some of the analysis that you did on August 16th, 2021. You have that report there?
I do, yes.
This specifically, you looked at the casing.
Yes.
And the casing, the DNA analysis was insufficient. I mean, you can't really say that Mr. Wallace's DNA was there or was not there. Is that a fair way to categorize that?
For that sample, it didn't even make it to the final step of DNA testing. So quantity-wise, there wasn't enough to even do the test.
Okay. And then moving forward to your August 31 submission or your analysis there, you have the hat, right?
Correct.
And it's possible that Mr. Wallace's DNA could be on the hat, or maybe it's not on the hat. Is that a fair characterization of the analysis of the hat?
Specifically, I would say no determination can be made regarding inclusion or exclusion.
And I don't mean to mince words here, but if can you go as far to say as there is a male contributor on the hat in addition to Jason Rayner?
That would be the subject of the report that I didn't do.
Okay.
That was submission one that Corey Crumley put out that report.
But point being, there's a mixture of at least two individuals on the hat?
I believe she reported a mixture of two.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about sir, I think you have your notes in front of you. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
And I know that the way that you do so many of these, but there's a unique FDLE number 719 ending.
Yes.
Okay. Right. And you would recognize this firearm to be the one that the state is attributing to Mr. Wallace?
Yes, I do.
And specifically, you had mentioned about the swab of textured areas.
Right.
And please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but when I hear textured areas, you're talking about the lower handle portion of the gun?
That's part of it. I mean, I titled that entire sampling from the gun as textured areas, but it would be the grip that you're speaking about, the grooved side there of the slide.
You know, just to be clear, I'm pointing my finger towards the front muzzle of the gun. Is that included in the area?
No, that was a second sampling I took from the gun. The textured areas would be the grip, the trigger, the slide area, as well as the magazine itself. I swabbed that, and that one item was tested. And then separately, I swabbed the barrel area, tip area. And that was a second sample that was tested.
Sir, what are you categorizing as the slide?
The very back top piece there above the plastic, right?
You know, I'm not putting my hands on towards the back of the gun like that, your sight button up,
Right.
and then all the way up to where the slide is back in like this safety position,
Correct.
and that is all slide.
That's what I would call the slide area that I swabbed.
And are you including that in the textured area?
Yes.
And my recollection is that there was a donor of 3 persons.
A mixture of 3 individuals to that DNA sample.
And the only one that we had any conclusive analysis was, this will probably say that was Wallace's DNA.
He was included and Jason Rayner was excluded.
And then we did have the barrel portion, and I'd like you to just describe, what are you categorizing against the barrel?
The tip of the gun where the bullet would exit that area, and not real far down, but that area where the bullet would come out.
In here, in this demonstration, you know, for demonstrative purposes, there's more of the barrel that would be exposed to the person holding the firearm, right? I mean, the barrel is exposed more than.
I assume so. I don't know. I don't know what that gun would look like with the slide forward, I guess, is what you're saying. The slide is back, so therefore more barrel showing. I'll take your word for it. I don't know.
How much of the barrel is exposed?
The tip area, directly from my notes, I swabbed the barrel end area outside and inside. So probably about a 1/4 inch from the opening and back.
And that would be consistent with the area that is touched partially by the zip tie right here.
I think so. I can't see unless you turn it. Yes, right near that area, yes. Oh, the black zip tie? Okay, I didn't see that till you turn it. Yes.
And you can make no determination about the identity of any DNA contributor on that particular area.
Right. The amount of DNA I got from that was very limited and could not be used for any interpretation or comparison. Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry, Deputy, can I steal that back from you again? If you would set down, so, on the cross, where you support the line.
Yeah.
As well as there, the right out the way. But for the textured area, the swab where both the walls is included as one of the 3 contributors, can you point out on the fire for each swab?
Area on the end, outside of this area here, which I call the slide area, with the texture grooving on that area, as well as the trigger. And then, like I said, also the magazine, especially the butt end of the magazine. These areas.
And for the second swab, the one that was the one that's sufficient DNA, like there's the point where you swab that.
Right at the barrel end, pretty much right there in that area.
Okay, just side channel. That's the only area that's on now.
Right.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Right, thank you. Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. May the witness be excused. State. Excuse, speak loud and clear into the microphone so we can hear what you have to say.
Thank you.
May proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Would you please tell us who you are and what you do?
My name is Jamie Williamson. I'm a senior crime laboratory analyst in the firearms section of the Department of Law law enforcement in Jacksonville.
And how long you been so employed?
I've worked with FDLE since January of 2008.
Okay. And could you just briefly explain a little bit more what your role or position is, what you do there at FDLE?
Yes. So in 2008, I was hired as a forensic technologist in the firearms section with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. 2009, I was promoted to crime laboratory analyst in the crime scene section. And then in 2018, I made a lateral shift into the firearms section as a crime laboratory analyst. And then in 2021, I was promoted to senior crime laboratory analyst. That is my current job. As my current duties, I do microscopic comparisons of fired bullets, cartridge cases, shot shells. I compare them to each other to determine if they were fired in the same firearm and how many firearms that were possibly used in a crime. If I have a suspect firearm, I can also test fire that firearm and compare my known test fires to the unknowns from a crime scene and determine whether or not they were fired in that firearm. I do serial number restoration, I testify in court, and I have several other duties as well.
And your educational background briefly, you have a bachelor's?
I have a bachelor's in cellular molecular biology, and I have a master's in criminal justice.
How many firearms have you examined over the course of your career?
In my 15 years, over 2,000 firearms.
Okay, and how many cartridge casings over the course of your career?
So 2,000 times 2, 4,000, and then more than that, so thousands.
And have you testified in court?
Yes, over 40 times.
Okay, great. Your Honor, at this time, I'd ask that this witness be allowed to render opinion testimony.
You're allowed to testify in opinion form.
Thank you, Judge. Okay, so let's get down to what you were actually doing in this particular case. What was your involvement in this case?
I analyzed a firearm, a fired cartridge case, and a fired bullet jacket.
Okay, and what was the purpose of you examining those?
My job was to determine whether or not the fired cartridge case from the crime scene and a fired bullet jacket were fired in a specific firearm that was submitted.
Let's talk about projectile first. I think you mentioned that as well. Did you get a bullet or projectile as well to test?
Yes, it was a bullet jacket.
Okay. Were you able to do a microscopic analysis?
I looked at it under a microscope, but it wasn't marked well enough for microscopic comparison.
So the projectile itself, you did not do an analysis?
No, I did not.
Okay. So I believe that you had the casing that was collected from the crime scene where Officer Rayner was shot, and you were provided a firearm that was purported to be the weapon used in that shooting, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so walk us through what you did.
So when I receive a firearm from the evidence section, I take it back to my office and I do a visual exam of the outer packaging because everything comes to me sealed. So I make sure that the box is sealed. It comes in a box. I make sure the box is sealed, that my case number on my case file that I was assigned matches the case number on the box. And I'm just doing an overall outer examination. Then once I deem that this is the item I was supposed to receive, I open it and then I do a visual inspection on the items inside. There was a Glock pistol in this case. I did a visual exam. I make sure the barrel is clear. I make sure the chamber is clear. And then once I do that, then I can actually pick it up and do a physical exam on that firearm.
Did you get the serial number for that particular firearm?
Yes.
Could you review, if you need to review your report, could you please share the serial number? Please?
Yes, the serial number was NSM 913.
And was that a Glock Model 17?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the actual process that you went through. Tell us, walk us through what you did to get you to the point of doing a microscopic analysis.
Okay, so after I deemed the firearm to be safe to handle and do a physical exam. I'm taking notes on make, model, the caliber, if there's anything, wrong with the safeties or if they're working properly. I'm even taking down the class characteristics, meaning where's the extractor and the ejector placed in the firearm, as well as the rifling of the barrel. I then use ammunition, whether it's laboratory provided or ammunition submitted in a case. I will use that ammunition to test fire the firearm in our laboratory. We actually have an in-house range. In this particular case, I used our water tank that I can fire into. I collect bullets from the water tank, and then the fired cartridge cases are extracted and ejected upon firing. I just collect them from the floor. And then I can take them back to my office, and I look at those first before I look at anything else, because I want to see how that firearm marks. And so I'm looking at the cartridge cases to each other, which are extracted and ejected during the firing process. And I'm also looking at the fired bullets to each other. And those are the projectiles that come out of the barrel of the firearm.
Okay, so once you completed that review or analysis or evaluation, did you take one of those fired cartridges and compare it to the cartridge that was obtained from the crime scene where Officer Rayner was shot?
So before I do that, I do a visual examination of whatever items of evidence I receive from the agency. So in this case, it was one fired 9mm Luger caliber cartridge case. So I put that on my microscope and I just look at it to itself, again, noting what caliber it is, what make it is, what markings I see. And then I proceed to do a microscopic comparison to my test fires to determine if that unknown was fired in the firearm received.
So give us a little education on how you can take a projectile, or not a projectile, excuse me, a casing, and compare it to another one. I mean, what are you looking at?
So we're looking at class and individual characteristics. Class characteristics are basically what the manufacturer designs an item to be. That's anything, shoes, cars, firearms. So in a firearm, that is the caliber, that is the rifling, which are these lands and grooves inside the barrel. It's in a spiral rotation. That way, when the bullet is going through the barrel, it spins, just like when Tom Brady throws a football, you want that beautiful football spin. And so you get more accuracy. When I throw a football, it yaws all over the place. And that's what happens with a bullet without rifling. So sometimes it's a left-hand twist. Sometimes it's a right-hand twist. Sometimes it's 5 lands and grooves, 10, 9, 8. So I'm looking at these things of class characteristics. Now, where I'm doing actual microscopic comparisons is the individual characteristics. These are imperfections, random imperfections that are imparted inside the firearm during the manufacturing process. The firearm is a tool. This tool is made in a factory by other tools. During the manufacturing process, those tools that are making the firearm are forever changing with each pass. These are microscopic chip formations. These are just tiny, tiny microscopic changes with each pass. So then once a firearm is fully complete and moved on to its consumer, when it's fired, it leaves those microscopic imperfections on whatever item it fires. So that is what I'm looking at under a microscope to do my microscopic comparisons.
Now, you mentioned that the manufacturing process provides some, I guess, identifying characteristics or more.
Yes,
is that right?
correct.
What if you have consecutively manufactured Glock 17s, like one manufactured right after the other? Have you had any experience or training involving that, and whether or not there are still unique characteristics?
Yes, so within my 18-month training program with FDLE to be a firearms examiner, I actually partook in some studies that had been conducted in the past, and one of them was consecutively manufactured Glocks and Rugers. And so they have shown that even though that these firearms were consecutively manufactured, one after the other, we were able to identify which items were fired in which firearm. So that just shows that even if a firearm is made one after the other, the individual characteristics are still significant enough that allowed me to find correspondence between an unknown item and then the test fires from those firearms.
So, Ms. Williams, after you compared the shell casing that was provided to you from Daytona Beach Police Department from the crime scene where Officer Rayner was shot to a casing that you actually fired from the gun, did you reach a conclusion?
Yes, I did.
And talk to us about that. What was your conclusion?
I identified the fired cartridge case from the crime scene to have been fired in the Glock 17 pistol, my item number 3.
What does that mean, identified?
Identified is my term that I'm allowed to use instead of saying match, because match isn't technically what we like to say, but it is just how we use the verbiage based on the affiliation that I'm under, which is the Association of Firearm and Tool Marks Examiners. So we have these rules of what our range of conclusion, and identified means I am 100% sure that cartridge case was fired in this pistol.
Was this, what about peer review? Did you have a colleague look at it?
Your Honor, you can rephrase the question.
Okay. Was there a safeguard or a double check on your particular, somebody somehow to check your work for confirmation or to see if it confirmed?
So part of our standard operating procedures is when an analyst makes an identification, like I did in this case, that has to be verified by a colleague, a second analyst in the firearm section, and that was done in this case.
Okay. Just a moment.
Yes, sir. Yes, careful.
I want you to look at the file and just, and if there's something that you can identify. Okay, is that the firearm that you received and testified and compared to the shell casing from, received from the press?
Yes, it is.
And would you look at that casing? That would be the exhibit 41.
Yes, I recognize.
And how do you look?
I recognize my unique case number, the FDLE, and my handwriting, and as well on the actual cartridge case, I have the case number, my item number, and my initials.
And on exhibit 29, the firearm, how were you able to identify?
Same thing, my unique case number, my item number, my initials, and the serial number.
Into the witness, Your Honor.
I think any cross-examination? All right, may the witness be excused?
Yes.
Yeah, you already excused.
As we approach, just
Yes, sir.